My name is Alexandra Fairfield, and I'm a bartender for entities that shouldn't exist. Overall, my job is pretty standard. Serving drinks, turning down weirdos asking for my number, you get the gist. This place isn't that out of the ordinary. But just like every other normal bar in town, the Devil's Horn has its own set of regular patrons, and they set it apart from the rest. First, there's Jack. I'm not entirely sure what he is or what he does for work, but he refers to himself as a night stalker, whatever that means. I've never had any problems out of him, so he's okay in my book. Then there's Damascus. He's gotta be my least favorite of our regular crew. He's a 200-year-old incubus who's constantly trying to get in my pants. I have to hand it to him, he is a smooth talker, but his silver fox tactics don't work on me. On the other hand, Jerry is an ordinary guy. He's a human being unlike the majority of my patrons. Most humans aren't allowed entry to the Devil's Horn, but every so often the owner makes an exception. I like Jerry, but he's got a major drinking problem, and that often leads him to trouble. There's only two other entities that frequent our little haven enough to be considered irregulars. Sally is one of the prettiest girls that I've ever met. With flowing blonde hair, icy blue eyes, and the curves to make a NASCAR driver spin out. She's got it all. Unfortunately, she knows exactly how attractive she is, and it goes straight to her head. She's a vampire, and the claws and the fangs come out on a regular basis. And then there's Anonymous. I call him Anon for short. He's the most mysterious of the bunch, and fittingly, the only one who frightens me. He's been coming to the Devil's Horn for longer than anyone can remember, but no one knows a thing about him, not even his name. He usually takes a seat in the back and occasionally orders a whiskey neat, though I have a hunch that it's only performative. He wears the same brown fedora along with a pair of gloves and a trench coat. He likes to read an old yellowing newspaper that obscures his face from view. That's another thing about him. No one's ever seen what he looks like. Well, no one who's lived to tell about it, at least. One of my least favorite aspects about Anon is that whenever he decides to speak, something terrible usually follows. He's a real-life harbinger of doom and the reason for the only rule that I follow at the Devil's Horn. When Anon speaks, always listen. That's why when I glanced up to see him standing there last week, his malevolent aura radiating off him like toxic fumes, I got a chill that rattled me to my bones. Hi Anon, do you want another drink? I asked, vainly hoping that was all he needed. Of course, I was wrong. Beware. His voice came out deep and gravelly like he had chunks of concrete stuck in his throat. I always hated the sound of his voice, but even worse was the message. Beware. He would never elaborate, just that one harrowing word preceded by imminent disaster. I nodded and watched as he walked back to his seat at the far corner of the room. He reclaimed his seat, then opened his newspaper to continue reading like nothing had happened. Geez, you really got the short end of the stick tonight, huh? Jack said, leaning forward, his dark eyes foggy from all the gin and tonics that he had downed. Well, maybe. Then again, maybe not. Anon always says that before something bad happens. Doesn't mean it's going to happen tonight. Probably safe to text Keimer anyway, though, I said, producing my phone and drafting a message. Oh, no need for that. I can take on whatever trouble comes your way, sweetheart. I immediately cringed. I knew that voice all too well. Oh yeah, what are you gonna do? Screw the thing to death. If there even is a thing, we have no idea what's coming. And Damascus grinned, unshaken. His irises glowed an intense amber as he shot me a wink. Who knows, whatever it is, it won't be able to resist my charm. I frowned and Jack shot him a glare. Well, you're pretty easy for me to resist, I said, snatching a rag and cleaning out a glass. Damascus's grin faltered and he swirled his drink, watching the vortex that he had created before downing the entire thing. Another old-fashioned when you get the chance, babe. Heavy on the bitters. I sighed, utilizing the glass that I had been drying off to fulfill his request. I had just put the finishing touches on his cocktail when I heard a purr from further down the bar. Who's this? He looks scrumptious, Sally said, running her tongue over her canines. I slid Damascus's drink and then looked up to find a man walking into the bar. He was sharply dressed, his blonde hair slick with pomade, jawline sharp enough to cut glass. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find him attractive. The stranger sauntered up to the bar, claiming a seat beside Damascus and Sally, much to her delight. Her face lit up and I could see her subtly sidling over to him as he poured over the drink specials. Damascus, on the other hand, threw him a look of disgust. He was always the jealous type. My attention was torn away from the handsome newcomer by a voice. Jack had leaned in and whispered so that the others couldn't hear. "I'm gonna leave. I'd call Keimer if I were you. This guy is bad news and I don't want to stick around for what he's got in store." And with that, Jack slapped a 20 on the counter and made his exit. I took the cash, noting that he was 15 cents short on his tab, and pondered his words. Jack was good at sniffing out trouble. I decided to send Keimer a message just in case. Unfortunately, I wouldn't get the chance. I was interrupted by the man of the hour before I could pull out my phone. "Hi there, can I get a Manhattan, and make it strong if you will?" He shot me a grin, his perfect smile making my heart race. "Yeah, coming right up," I said, hoping that he hadn't noticed my cheeks glowing red. "Hey there, nice suit you got on," Sally chimed in, resting her elbows on the bar trying to catch the man's gaze. "Oh, thanks, hon, it's Armani." One look at Sally and I could tell that she was smitten. This guy could have said that he had found the thing in a dumpster for all she cared. It didn't matter to her. "Oh yeah, how much did it set you back? Mine was $7 grand. Damascus interjected, his signature smirk plastered across his face. "Oh, that's cute. This was 25. I wish I could have taken a photograph of that moment for two reasons. One, because the look on Damascus's face was priceless. And two, because that was the last moment of peace that we would have before a disaster would unfold right before my eyes. "Hey, Alec, my beer is warm. Can you give me another one?" As much as I love Jerry, he doesn't know when he's had one too many. I watched, my blood turning to ice as he tripped over his own foot. The Miller Lite that he had been nursing sloshed forward, and to my utter horror, it soaked the new guy's expensive suit. I held my breath, waiting for a reaction. The man just stared forward for a few seconds, jaw clenched as he blinked the beer from his eyes. Sally looked mortified. Damascus snickered. Jerry clumsily rose to his feet, assessing the damage that he had done. "Whoa, sorry buddy, how about I buy you a drink as an apology?" What happened next occurred so fast that if I had blinked I would have missed it. The man stood, brushed off his jacket, and delivered the smoothest right hook that I had ever seen. Jerry slumped to the floor, hitting his head on a bar stool on the way down. There was no doubt about it. He was out cold. Before I had a chance to process what had just happened, Damascus clobbered the man in the nose, knocking him off balance. He staggered back, shocked by the sucker punch to the face, and fell flat on his butt. A rivulet of blood trickled down his nose, and he glared up at Damascus with a hatred that I had never witnessed in anyone before. "Oh, you'll pay for this," the man snarled, tending to his battered face. He suddenly didn't seem so attractive anymore, sitting there all bloody and soaked in beer. And Damascus, on the other hand, had won my heart for the first time in his life. "I doubt that," Damascus grinned, taking a step closer. All of a sudden, the door flew open, and our bouncer Sean lumbered through it. Sean is a big guy, he's got giant blood in him, and it shows. He's 7 foot 2 inches of pure rage and muscle. He crashed through the bar, grabbed the pair of squabbling heathens by the collars, and proceeded to the door with them. "Hey, why am I getting kicked out?" Damascus shouted, helpless against Sean's vice grip. "Sean," I said, causing him to stop in his tracks. "Damascus can stay." He was defending Jerry. Sean huffed before dropping Damascus to the floor. Our mysterious guest turned back to me, that look of hatred in his eyes so strong that I felt it boring through my flesh, and he shouted, "You made a big mistake tonight, all of you. This isn't over." Much to everyone's satisfaction, Sean chucked the troublemaker outside and slammed the door shut behind him. "Oh, sheesh, I'm glad that's over with. And to think I was gonna ask for his number," Sally said, producing a cigarette from her purse and beginning to light it. "Not inside, Sally, we've been over this." "Oh, you're such a downer sometimes, Alex, you know that," she retorted before slinking to the door. "Are you okay, Damascus?" I said as I made my way to where Jerry still lay slumped on the floor. I hurriedly checked his pulse and breathed a sigh of relief when I found that he was alive. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Good. I'll be honest, I'm impressed. I didn't know you and Jerry were that close." "We're not," he said with a smirk. "I just couldn't pass up an opportunity to knock that prick's lights out." Once everything was said and done, the guy who had started the brawl was blacklisted. Jerry was fortunate enough to walk away with minor injuries, a black eye and a bruised ego. I wish I could say that it ended there, but unfortunately I can't do that. Weird things happened around the bar for the next week. It started off small. A glass shattering when no one had touched it, a full keg of beer losing all of its fizz, Jerry staying sober on a Monday. And then it escalated. Patrons began staying away because of a lingering sense of dread permeating the air. Most claimed something felt off, but they couldn't put a finger on it. I had a feeling that I knew who was causing it, and as it turns out, my intuition was correct. It was a dreary Tuesday morning when I received the shocking phone call. Sean had been rushed to the hospital. I paid him a visit the first chance I got, praying that he would be okay. The Keimer hadn't told me how bad it was over the phone. When I laid eyes on Sean's swollen and battered face, my heart broke for him. "Sean, who did this to you?" Keimer said, his pointed ears glowing red at the tips. Someone had put his bouncer out of commission and he wasn't happy about it. "Oh, that guy from last week. Alex knows the one." He croaked, barely able to make eye contact with us. My heart sank. Yeah, I had a feeling it was him. How many of them were there, Sean?
3, maybe 4, I'm not sure. It all happened so fast.
Well, that's concerning. I'll be manning the door in his absence until he recovers, Keimer told me before turning back to Sean, who was already beginning to doze off.
Get some good rest, big guy.
Even amidst the severity of our situation, I couldn't help but giggle at the sight of Keimer standing on a step stool peeking through the slot on the door. The elves in Keimer's family aren't very short, but he's the exception. Much to his chagrin, his height maxed out at a whopping 5'1". The sight of him playing bouncer for the night was amusing to say the least. "Another whiskey if you'll be so kind," Jack said, polishing off the one he had been nursing.
"Yeah, one for me too,"
Jerry shouted, accidentally slamming his glass onto the counter. "Jack, yours is coming right up. Jerry, you're cut off."
"Oh, come on, Alex, just one more."
"Jerry, sweetheart, you're tripping over your own 2 feet again. Come, take a seat," Sally interjected, patting the stool beside her. Jerry smiled, his cheeks burning red.
"Don't have to tell me twice."
I sighed, catching the way that Sally glanced at Jerry's neck. "Don't even think about it, Sally," I said, handing Jack his drink. "Oh, Alex, do you really think so little of me? I would never." She made a big show of folding her arms and sticking her nose in the air. I was trying to think of a witty response when a commotion at the door captured our collective attention. It was flung open, seemingly of its own volition, sending Keimer crashing to the ground. My heart nearly stopped when I laid eyes on the man walking through the doorway. The same guy from a week prior led the charge, his glowing red eyes surveying the room. The others in his entourage were dressed just like him. In fact, they almost looked like carbon copies. Slicked back hair, expensive suits, shark-like predatory behavior. One look at the group was enough to send a chill crawling up my spine.
What do you say, boys? Should we rough them up a little? Show them who they messed with?
Two of the men nodded in agreement. The third didn't respond, his eyes laser-focused on something in the back of the bar.
Well,
the leader said, impatiently tapping his foot. The man tore his gaze away and I could see him begin to tremble. I knew exactly what he was looking at, and he had a right to be terrified.
We gotta go. Trust me, you do not want to get on that thing's bad side,
he said, pointing to where he had been staring. Anan sat there, his malevolent air stronger than ever. Though I couldn't see his eyes, I could tell that his gaze was trained on our untimely intruders.
Oh crap, I didn't see that the last time I came. Yeah, let's get out of here.
The squad proceeded to the door where Keimer stood, arms crossed and steam wafting from his ears. Cops are on the way. You'd better scram before they get here. The leader scoffed.
You don't scare me, and that goes for the rest of you too. Mark my words, you will rue the day that you messed with Alan Steele.
He shoved Keimer, who tripped over the step stool and fell back to the ground. Steele's cronies sneered as they followed him out the door. I made my way over to where Keimer sat, flipping the bird to the lot of them and extended a hand. He waved me off, slowly rising to his feet. I hate those guys. Bunch of stuck-up pricks think they can waltz in here and act like they own the place. No way, Keimer said, shaking his fist. Hey, at least there's a silver lining, I replied, crossing my arms. The guy was stupid enough to shout out his full name. Now you've got something to give to the cops. It was a small consolation. Keimer and I both knew that it wouldn't help, which meant that we would have to beef up security and fast. Those men were a group of glorified bullies, but there was one thing that I couldn't shake from my mind. Keimer had the door deadbolted shut. So how had they managed to get in? An additional week went by with little activity. The police report had been filed, but as far as any of us knew, no one under the name Alan Steele had been brought in for questioning. I knew that, yet I still lulled myself into a false sense of security. Maybe the cops had been enough to deter them, or more likely one glance in Anand's direction had done the trick. Unfortunately for everyone involved, that was wishful thinking. Sean was cleared to return to work 2 days before the incident. He looked like a different man from the one that I had seen lying in that hospital bed. His wounds were healing nicely and he had regained his intimidating demeanor. I think part of him was hoping that those guys would come back. He was itching for revenge. Keimer had hired another bouncer in lieu of the recent drama, a half-blooded troll named Tarn. The added security helped put my mind at ease, but even so, we could all sense a lingering tension in the atmosphere, an unexplainable foreboding that none of us could shake. What's the deal with you, Jack? Your eyes keep darting around the room, it's kind of worrying me, I said as he turned back to his drink. I don't know, I feel like something's coming. I don't know what, but I think that warning from Anan wasn't only for that time those creeps slunk in here. I think there's gonna be trouble. Big trouble. I pursed my lips. His statement had affirmed everything that I had been feeling. I can sense it too, but don't worry, dear, I'll fend them off just like the last time. Damascus smirked, taking a swig of his vodka lemonade. I rolled my eyes. What a douche. Everyone felt it. Even Sally, with her usual carefree attitude, seemed to be aware of the growing unease. The only one who wasn't fazed by the gloomy atmosphere was, of course, Jerry. He leaned against the bar, glassy eyes poring over the drink menu that he already knew by heart. I made up my mind, he said, swaying slightly on his stool. A rum and coke for me. pretty pleased with sprinkles, and Damascus scowled at him. "Gerald, don't you think you've had enough? Haven't you gotten tired of waking up every single morning with a throbbing headache and a queasy feeling in your gut? You're 35 years old with no wife, no kids, and a soul-sucking dead-end job. I'm no expert, but it seems like you need to wake up and turn your life around." And Jerry stared blankly at him before his eyes dropped to the floor. He nodded, seeming to turn over the words in his mind. Finally, after around 10 good seconds of thought, he faced Damascus and spoke. "Nah, I'm good," he said, turning to the bar and slapping his hand onto the counter. "Bartender, hit me with another round." Everyone collectively shook their heads. I sighed, resigning myself to preparing another drink for him, but before I could hit him with another round, something happened that would change everything. I watched Sean's face twist in confusion as the deadbolt turned on its own. The slot in the door ricocheted open and a pair of red glowing eyes appeared behind it. Sean tried to flip the deadbolt back to its locked position, but it wouldn't budge. The door suddenly slammed open, and both Sean and Tarn leapt back in shock. My heart plummeted as I laid eyes on the trash that filtered through the doorway. There were 5 of them this time. The first 4 were the same group of troublemakers who had harassed us before. The 5th one, however, didn't resemble the others in the slightest. With their slicked back hair and their expensive suits, this one wore a robe that drooped low, hiding its face from view. "Ah, so good to see you all again," Alan Steele said, licking his lips as he shot a wink in Sean's direction. His henchman snickered, chiding with delight. Anand suddenly stood from his chair and all eyes fell to him. He was without a doubt the most powerful entity in the bar. If anyone could take on those thugs, it was him. He took one step forward before Steele held up a finger and wagged it in a cocky gesture that deeply angered him. "Not so fast, big guy." Behind him, the robed figure raised a mottled hand, and a faint purple light enshrouded Anand's body, rooting him to the spot. Though his face was concealed, I could feel the rage radiating off of him like heat from a steam engine. I scanned the room, searching in vain for an out or a weapon or an escape path, something. I found nothing useful, but I did pick up on something strange as my eyes traveled between each individual in the room. Jack was missing. Oh great, he bailed on us again, I thought, pursing my lips. With Anand officially out of the picture and Jack running for the hills, that left me, Sean, Sally, Damascus, and Jerry, who, let's be honest, is probably more of a liability than an asset in a fight. Tarn was less than useless. He took one look at the group before darting out of the door, never to be seen again. I hope he tripped on a rock on his way out. No other patrons had stopped in that night, making it an uneven 4 versus 5 brawl on account of a non-stalemate with the hooded figure, and we didn't have the advantage. "Look, what do you want from us? An apology? Fine, we're very sorry that your suit got drenched in booze. Is that good enough?" I shouted, breaking the silence. Steel snarled, bearing canines sharp enough to pierce metal. A gnawing realization ate at me like a hungry piranha. Alan Steele and his gang weren't just a band of ordinary human deadbeats. No, they were something else, something powerful. "Good enough," he scoffed. "You amuse me. I want you to drop to your knees and grovel for forgiveness, all of you," he said, pointing an accusatory finger at each of us. "And you, gorgeous, you can stay kneeling." He smiled at Sally, who wrinkled her nose. "Disgusting," she spat, bearing her own pair of sharpened fangs. Steele licked his lips, his wet slimy tongue worming around his mouth. It made me want to vomit. "How about the rest of you, huh? Who's gonna make the first move, or are you too afraid to take your beating like an adult?" The sound of shattering glass snatched my attention. I turned to find Damascus standing there, suit jacket lying on a bar stool, a smashed beer bottle in his grip. His eyes flickered with the thrill of it all. "I will," he said, rushing towards Steele with a speed that I didn't know he was capable of. What happened next shocked me to my core. Damascus wasn't just talking a big game, he followed through on his threat, burying the jagged edges of the bottle into Steele's gut. Crimson blossomed through his shirt, staining his expensive suit. Steele's expression dropped. He glanced down at the blood dripping from his abdomen, and then he met Damascus's gaze, and a smile inched across his lips.
Did you really think it would be so simple to beat me?
He laughed, and I noticed a shift in his features. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it soon became impossible to ignore. Twin jet black horns sprouted from the hair on Steele's head. His eyes took on a deep red hue and his nails had morphed into thick and sharp claws. The remaining members of his group started changing too. Each grew a pair of horns, some cracked and some barely visible. None were as impressive as the ones that Steele sported. He glanced back to his pack of dogs, a wild grin on his face, before giving them a one-word command.
Attack.
The bar devolved into pure chaos. Damascus wrestled with Steele, Sean grappled with one of the freaks near the door. I produced the baseball bat that I keep under the bar and I tossed it to Sally. "Thanks, sweetheart, I owe you one," she said, winking and blowing me a kiss. "Don't mention it," I replied, turning to face my own opponent. The creep had a good foot on me in height, excluding the horns, and he looked hungry. Like he was a ravenous tiger and I was a big, juicy sirloin.
Oh, mighty unlucky tonight, aren't we? Your friends left you all to your lonesome.
I stared at him, snuffing out the faux fear in my eyes, and I grinned, watching his confidence falter. I had been waiting for this. "Oh, me, unlucky. I think you're the unlucky one here." The guy could only stand and watch as my body shifted and writhed before him. Dark green scales erupted across my flesh. My bones crunched and snapped as they reformed. My nails, just manicured 2 days prior, melted away in lieu of a pair of clawed digits. But my favorite feature, the one that makes all the boys drop dead, is my smile. Rows and rows of yellow serrated teeth replaced by a perfect set of pearly whites, primed and ready to tear into their next victim. The demonic entity stood stock still, soaking in my presence like a sponge.
"What are you?"
he croaked, his eyes wide. "Oh, wouldn't you like to know?" I smirked, my teeth glimmering like kitchen knives.
"Doesn't matter," he said, reapplying his overconfident persona. "Whatever you are, I'm going to end you."
He threw a jab at my head, which I narrowly avoided. He was faster than I would have thought, but not quick enough. I clamped my jaws down into his arm, sinking my teeth deep into his flesh. He unleashed an ungodly roar, the sudden outburst reverberating throughout the dogfight ensuing around us. I wrenched my head from side to side, trying to cause as much damage as possible, eliciting a wail of pain. And then, just as I was reveling in my success, I felt a sudden blow to the temple, followed by another and another. I released my grip and staggered backward, my head beginning to swim. The thing standing over me grinned. He caressed his good hand, which I came to realize was what had delivered the blows. I watched, my eyes growing wide as the exposed flesh of his ruined arm slowly began to heal. What? How is that possible?
"We're no ordinary demons. Should have gathered that by now. We were sent to Earth from the big man downstairs. He wouldn't allow us to leave uninsured."
Before he could continue, though, a rogue beer bottle was smashed over his head. The demon paused, his fist clenched, before slowly turning to face the perpetrator. Jerry stood before him, trembling violently. His face was as pale as a ghost, and I could see the instant regret in his eyes. I could have kissed him in that moment, not that it would have been a pleasant experience for either of us. Unbeknownst to him, though, Jerry had given me just the distraction that I needed.
"Seriously, you could have just ran, you know. Nobody would have blamed you,"
the demon said with a sigh. but now I have to kill you in front of your old lady friend here." He didn't even get to take a single step before I was on top of him. I bit down hard on his neck and pulled, a sizable mass of flesh tearing free. Blood poured from the open wound like a faucet, soaking everything in the immediate vicinity, including me. My victim made a vain attempt to stop the bleeding. He grabbed a nearby rag from the bar and shoved it into the gash, but it was no use. Before he could react, I sunk my teeth in again, ripping away more flesh and sinew before he had a chance to heal. I kept chewing and tearing away at the thing's throat as he desperately clawed at my scales. He quickly grew weaker and weaker until eventually, I glanced up from the carnage to find that the light had been snuffed out from his eyes. Only then did I realize that I may have gone a tad bit overboard. The demon's throat had been entirely torn away, leaving only his spine adjoining his head to his body. I wanted to throw up. I had never attacked anyone so viciously before, but I couldn't do that. I had to remember where I was and what was at stake if we didn't come out of this victorious. I stood, wiping blood and chunks of eviscerated flesh from my cheek. Jerry stared at me, his mouth hanging open. I had never seen him so terrified in my life. "Thanks, buddy, you really came through for me. I'll explain later. Go keep Anon company while we sort this out," I said, nodding to where Anon sat, still bound by whatever black magic the robed figure had saddled him with. Jerry didn't even respond. He simply did as he was told, speed walking to the back, where he took a seat by the brooding entity. With Jerry out of harm's way, I surveyed my surroundings, determining who needed my help the most, and to my immense dismay, there was no clear answer. Sally wasn't faring well. Her face was bloody and the baseball bat lying a good distance away from her. Damascus was in a heated battle with Steel, the pair swapping blows like trading cards. Sean was entirely outmatched by his demonic counterpart. He was managing to get a punch or a kick in here and there, but ultimately, he didn't have much left in the tank. I was stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Damascus looked like he could hold out for a little bit. The problem was Sally and Sean, and by helping one, I would be condemning the other. And just as I was coming to terms with the fact that someone's blood was going to be on my hands, I caught a glint out of the corner of my eye. It was only there for a second, a metallic glimmer whisked away by an invisible force as quickly as it had appeared. My heart leapt with joy. I understood it then. We only needed to hold out for a little while longer. Even so, I still had to think on my feet. Sally was the closest to me. I wanted to help Sean, but I was scared that I wouldn't make it in time. A light bulb flickered in my head, and suddenly I knew what I had to do. I leapt over the bar and began taking bottle after bottle, launching the heaviest ones across the room with mixed results. Glass showered the floor around Sean's feet, but finally I managed to hit my target. A full bottle of tequila found its mark on the back of the demon's head, knocking him to the ground. That gave Sean a prime opportunity to fight back, and he didn't waste a single second. Without hesitation, I ran back around the bar and over to Sally. She was blocking the thing's blows as best she could, but she was taking a major beating. I intervened, raking my claws across the thing's throat, opening a deep gash before grabbing Sally's hand and hoisting it to her feet. "You could have shown up a little sooner. No guy's gonna want to flirt with a face this messed up," she said, blood trickling from her nose. "Hey, I had my own creep to handle. Cut me some slack." We didn't get a chance to continue bickering before the demon's wound had healed and he was back on us, his eyes radiating with rage. Even with the two of us joining forces, I didn't know if we would be quick enough to beat the monster staring us down. Meanwhile, out of the corner of my eye, I could see that Damascus was losing. Steel's healing ability gave him the edge. Damascus was a demon himself, but he wasn't blessed with the same advantage. "Come on, hurry up," I muttered, my heart beating a mile a minute. Our opponent didn't wait around. In the blink of an eye, he was on top of us. This one was somehow faster than the one that I had taken down, and he packed a harder punch too. I suddenly found myself being knocked to the ground, blindsided by an unexpected blow to the face. My vision swam as I got back up. I woozily glanced around, trying to regain my stability. Everything was going wrong. Sean was back to losing his battle. Damascus had finally been beaten into submission. Sally was 2 seconds away from ending up like me. But through all the haze and bloodshed, I saw our saving grace. Jack suddenly appeared from thin air behind the robed figure, brandishing a knife. He slit the thing's throat in one swift motion. Whatever was beneath that drooping fabric desperately grabbed at its bleeding jugular, helpless to stop it. It crumpled to the ground, a pool of crimson blossoming around its corpse. I grinned. Anan had been released. A newfound hope swelled within me as he materialized behind the douchebag fighting Sally and me. The demon was just about to punch Sally's lights out when he paused, sensing Anan's presence, and spun to face him. I have never seen Anan so angry before. The aura radiating off of him was downright sinister. He clearly didn't like being contained. "Can I help you?" our tormentor said, trying to hold up a strong facade despite the tremble in his voice. Anan didn't answer. "Sally, look away," I said. She understood, following my orders. I averted my gaze, and just as the brown fedora was tipping upwards, revealing the monstrosity underneath. "What the hell is that thing?" That was it. He didn't even get a chance to scream. I clamped my eyes shut, the wet slough of viscera hitting the ground and the nauseating crunch of bone filling my ears. Before I knew it, the sound wasn't so close. There was a pause, and then it resumed across the bar further away. Anan must have been taking care of Sean's attacker. "Alex?" Sally said, staring at the wall. "Yeah." "Anan, what is he doing to them?" Her face was pale as a ghost. "I don't know, and I have a feeling that we don't want to find out." Just when I thought that all of our problems were going to be solved, I heard a weak voice calling my name. "Alex, Sally, help." I had to risk it. I turned, and thankfully Anan was facing away, disassembling Sean's opponent. My eyes fell to the only demon still standing. Steel. Damascus was in bad shape. He was lying on the floor, bloody and bruised, the outfit that he took so much pride in tattered and ruined. Steel stood over him, a sinister gleam in his eye. He raised a broken beer bottle above his head, presumably the same one Damascus had stabbed him with, and prepared to bring the jagged edge down hard on Damascus's skull. Though he wasn't my favorite patron, he had fought for the Devil's Horn on his own accord. He didn't have to do that. I couldn't just sit there and watch him die. I leapt into action, bolting over to the pair, praying that I would make it in time. It was going to be close, but if I timed it right, I had a shot. I held my breath as I dove through the air, my body acting as a shield. The craggy edges of the bottle pierced my scales, and I felt a sharp pain jolt through me as I hit the floor. "Oh, would you look at that?" Steele said, grinning from ear to ear. "You're doing my job for me. I was going to get to you later, but no point in waiting around, I suppose." Fear surged through me as Alan Steele took a step closer. He raised a clawed hand, ready to swipe it across my exposed underbelly. A slash like that had the potential to tear me open like a piñata. He brought his hand down, and I instinctively covered myself the best I could, wincing as the glass shifted beneath my skin. I closed my eyes, expecting to feel the pain of 1,000 hot coals searing into my flesh at any moment. But it never came. When I realized that I hadn't been sliced to ribbons, I hesitantly opened my eyes and glanced up. A gloved hand held Steele's arm back, preventing him from attacking me. His features shifted, shock morphing into dread as he realized what was happening. He surveyed his surroundings, having seemingly been oblivious to the fact that his cronies were dead. He went pale as his eyes fell to Anan. "No, this can't be happening. You're just a bunch of pathetic worms. I was supposed to win, me. I refuse to accept this. Alan Steele will." Those are the last words he spoke before the nauseating crunch of bones permeated the ensuing silence. "You really saved our butts back there. You never mentioned anything about invisibility before," I said, sliding Jack a drink. Oh yeah, well you never mentioned anything about being a fish person or whatever the hell you are, he said as slipping a 10 across the bar. Touché. Keep it. Drinks around the house tonight, I said, winking as I passed him back the bill. I could see Damascus eyeing me from a couple seats down. Yes, yours too, I said as he returned to smirk and took a sip of whiskey. I'll take what I can get. That suit those punks ruined wasn't cheap. Anyway, how's your wound healing? Oh, pretty nicely, it wasn't deep. Keimer wanted me to take some time off, but I'll be okay. I see you're good as new already. Just 24 hours ago, I thought you were going to be a dead man. Oh, the mighty Damascus dead. It wouldn't suit me. Oh yeah, I think it would suit you just fine. Sally chimed in, earning herself a scowl. Yeah, Jerry shouted. But I stopped us all from really being dead. He said, slumping against the bar. You did good, Jerry, I'll give you that, I replied. But I think we all know who the real hero is. I nodded to the back of the room where Anand sat, the same yellowing newspaper hiding his face. He didn't even look up. He simply raised his glass into the air in response. Cheers, Jack said as all the other patrons followed suit. I'll drink to that.
Susan Corndecki, Ray, Nelson Asada, Dice, Creamy, Me, Gasher, Dalmagara, That One Woodsman, Sonic, GMD, Leonard, Takio, Cirilla, Nina Lynn Kidder, SWAT, Damon McCory, Martin Norman, yours truly, Dino, Lunas TV, Wayward Son, Deus Ex Nihilo, Big Country Allen, Pamela Shockley, Sleepy Shroomy, Caleb Windsor, Kathy McGuire, Paige Martin, Richard Freds, Shrimp of the Shrimp, Happy Massacre 91, Jacob Parlin, Miss Eldridge, Casey Long, Justin Phone, Howard Mole, Sanjay Anthem, Almost Sam, Michelle Lee, Bradley Brewer, Agent Black, Michael Oliver,
Just a heads up before we get into today's video. Go and support the author and check out his YouTube channel, Black Volumes. It'll be linked below in the description. Some wonder how reality came to be, and some wonder why. Before embarking on the Victoria 21 voyage, I was drawn to the latter question. If an answer exists, however, I now know that it would be too terrible to bear. Many outside of the scientific world believe that these secrets of existence lie beyond it. Some may hope to find the creator past reality's rim, but they would be horrified to learn the truth. Most in the scientific community, of course, claim there to be no beyond at all, nothing but our tangible plane. Still, even they have never publicly offered a fixed answer. After all, even if nothing exists beyond the universe, another question remains. Is reality finite or infinite? Cosmologists have long sought to chart the bounds of existence. Some say that we simply live in an endless universe, but others claim it to be so colossal that it appears endless. Last month, following a 3-year expedition, the finite argument was proven true. That may infuriate some scientific minds who stumbled across my tale, but it is the truth. Earth, not wholly observable by the eyes of an ant, is still bounded, and the same is true of our universe. However, unlike our small planet, reality exists on a two-dimensional plane, one with an edge. That was what Dr. Alec Irwin explained on May 1st, 2021. It was something that he learned by using a piece of technology known as the A4 radar. Are you truly proposing that we should believe this drivel? Dr. John Macy scoffed. That we should believe in an edge of reality. If the universe were finite, it would likely be an unbounded hypersphere. not a bounded two-dimensional plane. Yet, that is not so, Irwin replied. Macy huffed. Nearly everyone in this room views the universe as infinite. You have made a baseless claim, Dr. Irwin. Given the A4 radar simply failed to detect anything, how do we know what lies beyond this edge? We don't, Irwin admitted. That's why we need to send a team. The lead researcher received no immediate response. The dozens of NASA specialists simply exchanged silent looks, and then a few seconds later, the laughing started. A cacophony of hearty roars bouncing off the walls of the expansive meeting room. Fantastic idea, Dr. Irwin. Dr. Macy chuckled. It's a shame that team won't reach the end of reality before, well, the end of time. Not with NASA technology. That's why a dozen minus will supply the equipment. And Dr. Irwin said, folding his arms. You know as well as I do that they have taken enormous strides over the past century. That is why their technology has been kept from public eyes, kept from the world's governments when it comes to their classified projects. Allegedly, Macy sharply replied. Allegedly, Irwin nodded. Listen, this wouldn't be the first collaboration. We have used their spacecraft before. Machines far beyond our capabilities, far beyond the capabilities of man. It is not a question of whether we can achieve this mission, Dr. Macy. It is a question of whether we will. Macy frowned. Fine, I'll amend what I said. If we launch a dozen minus craft today, we should reach the edge of the universe in 1,000 centuries or so. Not if we use a splinter, Dr. Irwin muttered. Dr. Macy was immediately silenced. The room's wave of laughter faded, finally lapping against the shore. It faded as these scientists realized one by one that Dr. Irwin had not simply entertained a foolish notion. He had lost his mind. The splinters which appeared decades ago in distant parts of reality are anomalies. Anomalies of unknown origin with varying purposes. Most, of course, lead to galaxies beyond our reach. One in particular leads past all known galaxies, past the observable universe. I thought that we were here to hold a serious meeting, Dr. Macy eventually said. I am serious, Dr. Irwin replied. The S-79 splinter has fascinated me since it first emerged in late 2010. I used it in fact to send the A4 radar to the edge of reality, to retrieve data trillions of light years away, and the evidence is undeniable. S-79 would propel the latest dozen minus craft, Victoria 21, to a point far beyond our observable realm, a point near the edge detected by the A4 radar. This voyage would involve a 1-month journey to S-79's entry point, followed by a 1-year journey from its exit point to the detected edge. Macy shook his head slowly. You're not the scientist that I remember, Dr. Irwin. Not the one that I thought you were, at least. Then what kind of scientist am I, Dr. Macy? Irwin responded, narrowing his eyes. One who actively seeks to advance mankind, or one who simply writes theses? I'm a man of principle, Macy growled in response. I would never propose a mission that puts lives at risk. Let us not forget the result of your last expedition. I anticipated that jab, Dr. Irwin said. This isn't the same as the Flores mission. Dr. Macy sighed. Alec, when it comes to dozen minus, everything ends the same way. They operate in a way that we do not fully understand. They offer gifts that should be impossible not only in our lifetimes, but 1,000 lifetimes from now. The man then turned to address the rest of the room. This is not a company to be trusted, people. Do not let Dr. Irwin sway you. Do not let advanced technology sway you. Why is it that whenever Stefan Blom provides support for projects, they always seem to end disastrously? The interests of Dozen Minus are not the interests of... Enough. Emmett Cade, NASA's OTR director, interjected. Dr. Macy, you know that these meetings are about more than the interests of any organization. After all, not all who work in this building are aware of this meeting, how are they? Macy grimaced. But, listen. In 2 days, Senator Nelson will become our new administrator. Cade continued. There will be changes in NASA over the coming weeks. There will be countless eyes and ears on us. I trust, Dr. Macy, that you won't be running your mouth in front of folk without T-level clearance. Of course not, Mr. Cade, Macy gasped. I take my job seriously. So do I, Irwin said. Do you not want to know, John? What? Dr. Macy asked. Know what lies at the edge of everything, Dr. Irwin whispered. What lies beyond the edge of everything? If something lies beyond the edge of everything, then we haven't found the edge of everything, Dr. Macy said. Oh, don't be obtuse, Irwin hopped. You know what I'm claiming. Not that nothing exists beyond our universe. Quite the opposite, in fact. Something lies beyond it. Something that the A4 radar didn't know how to process. Whatever exits beyond the edge, it's nothing that abides by the laws of our realm. Nothing that. Exactly nothing. The A4 radar picked up nothing. Dr. Macy interrupted. Even if we were to use the S-79 Splinter as a boost, propelling our team to a distant point of the universe, they may find nothing at all, or nothing that humanity has any equipment to record. After all, we only know of things within our reality, and that would mean they'd be wasting over 2 years of their lives. We know of more than our reality, Dr. Macy, Irwin said. Have you forgotten what Dozen Minus showed us in Birmingham? You should watch your tongue too, Dr. Irwin, Emmett Cade barked. Sorry, sir, Dr. Irwin mumbled. And Dr. Macy, the project is continuing regardless of your disapproval, Emmett Cade said. This meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was an announcement. You know it's coming, Calvin, Celine whispered to me. Don't, I begged. We had long been earmarked for adventures such as this, and I knew that before Emmett Cade locked his eyes onto the pair of us. We were cowering at one side of the room, but we hadn't escaped his stare. Calvin Beckinsale and Celine McGinnis, Emmett announced, waving a hand in our direction. 2 of our finest physicists. They will be joining Dr. Alec Irwin on the Victoria 21 spacecraft. When? I meekly asked. July 1st, Emmett asked. 2 months? Celine breathlessly asked. How on earth are we supposed to prepare in that length of time? I've been preparing for years. The longer we leave it, the greater the chance that we miss our window, and Dr. Irwin explained. And that was the only attempt that Celine made at contesting the mission. I was always more passive than her, so I simply nodded. I had accepted our fate before Emmett Cade had even confirmed it. Accepted it in 2015 when I first received clearance for T-level meetings. Accepted the possibility that at some point, NASA's shadowy department would demand that I contribute. Demand service. Celine was right, of course. 2 months was hardly enough time to prepare, but Alec Irwin had been spending years planning for that very moment. In fact, Celine and I only really achieved one thing over those 8 weeks. We learned just how unwell the man had become. It was clear that psychologically, Dr. Irwin had already crossed the boundary at the edge of the universe. His mind no longer seemed to entertain any thoughts about our planet, our reality, and only one thing frightened me more than that. And deep down, I shared his perturbing delight. his hunger for what lay beyond all. On July 1st, 2021, Victoria 21 launched with Irwin, McGinnis, and me on board. The initial month of the trip took us past all known galaxies, took us to the intimidating chasm past all that had been observed from Earth, but not the edge of all that exists. And as we approached the splinter, that gurgle in my gut only grew, as if something from the other side were pulling us towards it. Splinters are aberrations beyond Earth's observable reality, detected by dozen-minus technology in the late 20th century. Time will tell whether these rips bode well for our universe, but the unknown has not deterred mankind from using the splinters, even if that risks the end of all that we know. And S-79, the splinter in question, was even more terribly alluring than it appeared in photographs. The rip in reality's fabric did not present itself as something akin to a black hole. It was a jagged wound, the result of some cosmic blade tearing into existence itself. Whether from another universe or our own, we still do not know. All we knew at the time, according to Dr. Alec Irwin, was that S-79 would lead us to some distant place in reality, some place near his supposed edge of reality. "Why are you wearing that expression?" Irwin had asked me. I gulped, the butt of my jeans squelching in the pilot's chair. "I'm just thinking that we still have time to turn around." "We've almost entered the eye," Irwin said. "The hard part's nearly over. Leave your fear this side of the hole, Captain Beckinsale." "I just don't know whether I trust the data," I said. "The A4 radar might have survived the trip to the other side, but it was made of titanium, not skin and bones." "Pull yourself together," Irwin tutted. "You're our captain and you need to act like it." "I am acting like it," I finally retorted, tensing as the edges of S-79 started to engulf our ship. "That's why I'm wondering whether we should stop." "You may be the captain of this vessel, but I'm still the leader of the project, Beckinsale." Irwin snarled. "Don't make me use that card. I will if necessary." I huffed, tightening my grip around the lever and pushing it forward without another word. Moments after the ship accelerated, the splinter fully encompassed us. I expected a near-endless tunnel, expected to feel the tug of some unimaginably oppressive external force, flaying my flesh from its skeleton. But there was only a split second of nothingness, an absence of sight and sound. S-79 had greater depths of colorlessness and silence than space itself. I became horribly aware that we were in a place between 2 points of reality, a rip revealing what truly lay beyond the borders of everything. Not that our eyes could see that revelation. I only sensed it for the briefest moment, that Irwin had been right all along. There was something beyond our universe, and that did not fill me with awe. It filled me with terror. And then reality rushed back into view. We were faced with the blackness of a distant, starless part of the universe. Black but not colorless. Silent but not in the same way as S-79. Though we had passed all galaxies, stars, and planets, it was clear that we had returned to reality. There was nothing but darkness around us, yet it was space, it was physical, not as absent as the splinter. "Well done, Captain," Irwin laughed, patting my shoulder. "Now we pursue the edge as it flees from us. Let us hope the Victoria can warp at the speed that doesn't mine as promised. We have made excellent time, Captain Beckinsale. That's why you're the best. By my estimations, we should find the edge on June 29th, 2022. I sighed, nodding. "Well, that's a long stretch of nothing ahead, Dr. Irwin, and then real nothing after that." "No, not nothing, Captain," Irwin said. "If there exists an edge, then there exists something beyond it." The man left and I suppressed the urge to respond snarkily. I was well aware that nothing as a concept did not exist, and if there were an edge of reality with something beyond it, then that something would not be nothing. But I didn't fancy an argument. Dr. Irwin did not recognize my expertise. He seemed to forget that Celine and I were physicists too. In his eyes, he was the smartest man on Earth, and any dissenting opinions came from lesser mortals. "Hey, nice work today. We made it to the other side," Celine said when I crawled into my bunk later that evening. Did Dr. Doom have much to say? Was he a good co-pilot? "Congrats, Celine. You managed to spend the whole day away from him, running analytics or whatever nonsense you made up," I said, slipping my hands behind my head and resting on the pillow. "You're a jammy dodger, you know that." "Oh, I'm sorry, governor," Celine smirked, poorly imitating my accent. "Oh, whatever, Yankee Doodle," I said as the woman peered over her top bunk. "You really know how to flirt, Calvin, don't you?" she replied, slipping down the ladder. I laughed. "Of course I do, it's that classic English charm. How about you come over here and Yankee my..." Let me stop you there before you ruin this," she softly interjected, clambering into my bunk and silencing me with her lips. I'm not sure why we were so secretive about our relationship. NASA officials were likely aware of it, and they were also likely not to care. Well, I lie. I do know why we were hiding it. It was a secret that we were keeping from Dr. Irwin. The man's temperament was less predictable than a violent gust. He was sometimes energetic and likable, but other times lethargic and lacking empathy. One thing was constant, however: Irwin's focus on the mission at hand, and I had a horrible feeling that he would react badly to knowing about Celine and me. Months rushed by. Only the passage of time reassured me that we were moving ahead, rather than being stuck in some perpetual purgatory. Blackness gushed past the viewpoints of the ship, so it was difficult to measure distance with eyes alone. Surprisingly, however, the journey didn't make us as irritable as I imagined it would. Irwin was giddy about finding the edge, and Celine and I were giddy about each other. On occasions, we even shared joyous moments with Alec himself. He was not a monster. Back at NASA, I hadn't ever had a reason to dislike the man. But since passing through the splinter, however, he had begun to change. Purpose can be a wondrous thing, but it can also be the death of a person. One night, as we neared Irwin's purported edge, I was awoken by a voice. Celine was sleeping soundly, so I delicately scooped her arm off my chest and slipped out of bed. As I tiptoed along the ship's main walkway, the voice had loudened, and I found Dr. Irwin near a side viewport, staring into the abyss of the cosmos. "Just let us see," the man mumbled. "Dr. Irwin?" I said. "It's there," he muttered. I looked at the man's face and realized that he wasn't staring at all. His eyes were closed and he was sleepwalking. Of course, that didn't make his ramblings any less disquieting. As I looked into the blackness, I was sure that I could see it too. Beyond all, the thing that I had seen in the splinter, if it were anything that we could call the thing. Again, I didn't see it with my eyes but my flesh. Goosebumps coated me, and I knew that we were approaching the edge. I didn't tell Celine what I saw. I crawled silently back into bed, closed my eyes, and stayed awake for the rest of the morning. Or rather, failed to sleep. When her alarm sounded at 6, I pretended to wake alongside her. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, trying to shake off the stodginess of my body. "Yeah, tired." "Well, wake yourself up. It's another day in paradise, sweetie," Celine sarcastically said. She was wrong. That morning was different. It wasn't just Irwin sleepwalking which made me feel unwell. It was a throbbing sensation in my chest. one that had accompanied me since we had passed through the splinter a year earlier. And when I found Erwin on the flight deck sitting in my chair, I already knew what he was going to say. "We found it," he whispered. I called Celine and the three of us gathered in the cramped cabin to see the darkness ahead. "What's the latest analysis?" Celine asked. Erwin tapped a monitor beside him. "We've reached it, McGinnis. The edge that the A4 radar detected. The last point in our reality at which matter is detected. 1 mile ahead of us, it all ends there." "Why aren't we moving?" she asked. "Captain Beckinsale brought us to a halt. He wanted you in the room before we did anything," Erwin gruffly responded. I sighed. "We need to think about this, Erwin. What do we see ahead of us? Nothing but more blackness." "Nothing?" Erwin scoffed. "What have I told you about that word? If we see blackness, then something exists out there, beyond the edge." "I don't know what I see," Celine said. "Not an edge, just more, just..." "What did you expect?" Dr. Irwin asked, swiveling to her face. "A line in the sand, a border between our reality and whatever lies beyond. We are stepping into the unknown, McGinnis. We have no idea what we might find, what we might see or not see." "Which is exactly why I think we should send a transmission home," I said. "We need to discuss our findings with ground control, collect data, and then..." "What, twiddle our thumbs?" Erwin interrupted. "I've been doing that for years, Captain Beckinsale. Collecting endless readings, conducting analysis. And what did I find? Nothing that could be read by the A4. Nothing that anyone at NASA understood. We've exhausted all other options. There is only one way to find any sort of answer: pushing onwards." I paused, keeping my eyes on the viewport to avoid the gazes of Celine and Alec. They were waiting for me to make a decision. I knew that Dr. Irwin hungered to explore the beyond, so had I, before the splinter worked its way into my mind, before it made me realize that horror awaited. I looked at Celine and a thought crossed my mind. I hadn't asked her out. Over the past year, I hadn't asked her whether she felt it too. The something that lay beyond all. The thing that had seemed so close during the second that we spent within the splinter, between 2 points of reality. Perhaps I had been too afraid to know. "Captain," Dr. Irwin said gently. "It might crush us into oblivion," I whispered. "You know that McGinnis and I didn't volunteer for this mission, don't you? We didn't volunteer to die." "You could have walked away, but you didn't," Irwin said. "Nobody walks away from T-level," I replied. The doctor shook his head. "Don't make it sound like a prison. You chose to be involved with the T-level department. You chose to learn of the things that NASA doesn't want anyone to know. You and McGinnis both. You joined because you wanted more. You wanted to see something that hadn't been seen." "He's right, Captain," Celine said timidly, no longer meeting my gaze. "This is our legacy." "I'm starting to think that a legacy doesn't matter," I said, begrudgingly scooting Irwin out of my chair. "After we die, nothing matters." "I don't think death exists in the beyond," Irwin whispered, clutching my shoulder as I sat down and placed a hand on the lever. "And I think you know that too." I eyed the monitor as I propelled the Victoria 21 forwards, and I watched as we approached the edge of all that our craft's radar could detect. The edge of matter. As for what existed in the beyond, we were about to find out, and I was certain that we were about to be obliterated. My fingers curled firmly around the lever, trembling as the ship's radar displayed less and less of existence. And then, without a bang, we experienced it again. Something not dissimilar to the nothingness of the splinter, yet far worse. far more terrifying. A blackness that didn't devour us but swallowed us nonetheless. We passed to the edge. "My word," Erwin whispered. We're alive." My knuckles whitened to top the lever. "I knew it. I knew you weren't as certain as you claimed to be. To be certain of anything is the poison of a thinking mind. I am never certain, Captain, and no matter what we experience from here onwards, we must be discerning. We must not trust our senses." For a man so seemingly uncertain, Dr. Irwin sounded confident to me. Strangely so, as if he were privy to some knowledge beyond me. I thought back to his unnerving sleep talking, and I started to think that, when we had entered S-79, he might have experienced more than me. Might have seen, heard, or felt something that gave him a reason to say such things. My thoughts returned to reality when the lever retracted, snapping backwards with such force that it sprained my wrist. "God!" I yelled, removing my hand and nursing it. Celine ran forwards as the ship lurched and then halted. "Are you okay, Captain?" Yeah, I panted heavily, noting that some unseen force in the darkness had obstructed the Victoria 21. We had not landed, not crashed. It was as if we were encased in some black gelatin, dark and dense muck that stalled the ship in its tracks. And no matter how much I tried to tinker with various controls, I saw no way of fixing the problem. After all, there was nothing to be fixed, no way of moving the Victoria. The engines and all other systems were in working order. We had simply been compressed by a black blanket. "We have to exit the craft," Irwin said. "I'm running tests," I replied. "We'll see what's outside and—" "It won't detect anything, Captain," Irwin promised, shaking his head. "You haven't accepted it, have you? We are beyond reality. We must step outside and see what we find. It wants us to step outside." "It doesn't," Celine whispered. Shocked, I twisted my head to face her and she offered me a sheepish expression. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You're not going to question him," Celine said, raising an eyebrow as she nodded at Irwin. "He talked about it too." "Yes, but I didn't think you had seen it or felt it," I said. "Well, I knew that the two of you had," she responded. "You talk in your sleep, Calvin." "Captain," Irwin corrected. "There is a proper procedure, McGinnis, when it—" "Oh, just stop for a moment, Alec," Celine softly urged. "We need to talk about what happened. We all saw something in the splinter, didn't we?" "There was nothing to see," Irwin said. "No," Celine agreed. "It wasn't a thing that human senses know how to process, yet I knew that it was there, and I know that you two felt it too." "I don't know what I felt," I said. "I don't even know why I'm here." "We're here for the same reason as Dr. Irwin," Celine said. "We pretended to be different from him, but we were lying to ourselves, Captain. We could have turned around, we should have turned around. Absolutely no doubt about that. But it isn't in our nature, is it? It has nothing to do with the splinter, nothing to do with what we did or didn't feel. The three of us are broken in some way, and we hope to find something in the beyond, an answer that might fix us." "I don't know what you mean," Irwin said, rising to his feet. "This is about the progression of mankind. It is about the discovery of all discoveries. It has nothing to do with me." "It has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with Calvin and me. We've always sought something bigger than us, something that might make us feel whole. Why else would we reach for the stars? Earth wasn't enough," Celine said. "We brought ourselves here. That thing in the splinter didn't call to us. It told us to stay away and we didn't listen." I turned to face Celine and my mouth failed me. My entire body failed me as I struggled to process my surroundings. I was outside the ship. Victoria 21 sat behind me in the darkness, not on a grounded surface, not on or in anything. And I too did not walk on ground. It was not a place in which ground existed, not a place in which known physics existed, yet the ship existed and I existed. But do I exist? I wondered. Is this even real? There was no time in that blackened nothingness, but I believe a lot of it passed before I realized that I was alone, realized that Celine and Alec were gone, and from what I distinguished, squinting through the primary viewport of Victoria 21, they, like me, were no longer on the flight deck. I tried to call for them, but there was no sound in that place, though I certainly tried to produce sound. And then a door creaked, the first noise in that silent existence, something in the nothing. I turned rapidly and drowned in a wave of motion sickness as my surroundings entirely changed a second time. I was standing in a room, one with a floor, a ceiling, and walls of mahogany planks. A couple of grimy window panes revealed not blackness, but a white void outside. Every surface was decorated with various scribblings and paintings, depictions of humanoid things and creatures that I had never seen. Mostly the sheets displayed barely legible writing. Who is my maker? That question was handwritten across numerous sheets of paper, sometimes scrawled atop whatever other writing had already been on the notes. The sloppily written queries seemed to deteriorate as my eyes danced across the walls towards the door. These documents revealed the musings of something mad. I immediately wanted to try the door, but my neck itched. It told me that something awful lurked within the place, but it also told me that something lurked behind me. I rotated sharply, preparing to meet my doom, but I was greeted by something far worse. Something far beyond anything that I had ever expected my mortal eyes to behold. Atop a cluttered wooden desk, which was pressed against the wall, there sat a crystal globe. Within its unblemished, spherical shell, blackness swirled, harboring pinpricks of vibrant colors, an ever-moving gaseous fog which felt like the only warmth in that place, the universe itself. My mind swam with fearful, nihilistic thoughts as my eyes flitted between the frail, glassy ball and the white expanse visible through the window pane above it. Reality seemed so terribly small and insignificant. More horrifyingly, I thought of the thing that had carelessly left an item so precious on a wooden desk, resting unsupported on a pile of notes. I did not ever want to meet that thing. While my eyes were lost in the miniature representation of reality, a scream sounded from beyond the door. I spun, shoulders shooting upwards in fright. I knew from the pitch of the pained voice that it was Celine, and I called out to her as I barreled through the door. I found myself in a long hallway of mahogany, much like the first room, and standing on weak legs at the end of the corridor was Celine. "Are you okay?" I asked, running forward. As I neared her, I noticed that she was reading one of the many notes lining the walls, and by the time that I reached her, I was horrified to find that I no longer knew whether her sounds were those of fear or laughter. "Celine," I whispered, before repeating the same question. "Are you okay?" She smiled without turning to me. "It's horrible, Kelvin. It's horrible." "What does it say?" I asked quietly. Fortunately, Celine didn't answer. She began to shred the piece of paper, startling me with her sudden mania. Though I begged her to calm down, she was hypnotized by the task at hand. Focused on ridding herself of whatever maddening thoughts had plagued her while she read, I still struggled to imagine a combination of words that could possibly instill such terror and joy. I don't know what she read on that piece of paper, and I never asked. I'm just glad she destroyed it before she finished reading. "Don't let me look at the others," Celine sniffled, finally stilling herself as she stumbled into my arms. Don't read any of it unless you want to lose a piece of yourself. I did read something, I admitted. Who is my maker? She whispered. I nodded. Do you think whatever lives in this place could be? Celine trailed off, but I knew what she was going to ask. I think we need to find Dr. Irwin and get out of here, I said. I'm sorry, Calvin. She whimpered as I led her to the hallway's far door. We should have turned around, I just had to know. And now I do. I know the tiniest slice and it's too much. I had never seen Celine like this. We had been together for years and known each other for a decade at the very least. She had always been sturdy yet bouncy, always full of color and strength. But after reading whatever she read on that slip of paper, she became a gray, feeble shell. When we opened the door at the end of the hallway, it led to the final room, one with a mahogany floor and ceiling, but walls of glass. Towering panes that revealed the white void beyond the house. The claustrophobic nature of the dwelling, or what had once been a dwelling, existed in stark contrast to the eternal expanse beyond the universe. In stark contrast to the humongous nature of reality itself, which had been reduced to nothing more than a meager ball of glass. The house was a construct that felt too human for my liking. It felt false. Alec, Celine whispered. I had been so lost in thought that I barely noticed the project leader standing in front of the glass wall ahead, gazing at the whiteness of the beyond. He didn't turn to face us when we had entered the room, though the sound of the creaking door loudly reverberated off the glass. Celine and I approached Dr. Irwin cautiously, and I half expected him to be muttering incoherently once more. It was worse than that, however. He wasn't making a sound, wasn't making a move. The man was motionless, eyeballing the blinding abyss outside. I tried to avert my gaze from the ceaseless whiteness, lest it drive me insane too. Strewn stacks of paper littered the floorboards beneath the man, and every inch of my body begged me to leave, begged me not to put my hand on his shoulder. I did it almost unwillingly. Dr. Irwin, I said, we need to leave. He eyed me, not slowly, not even with his usual vigor or passion. That had entirely fled his eyes. The man looked more hollow than Celine. She was positively vibrant in comparison, but my eyes only lingered on his face for a second. I quickly fixated on what he held in his hands. A skull. I trembled. Is that? No. Irwin interrupted, eyes and voice penetrating my body and then boring to the other side. It is not the skull of our maker. He isn't here. Not anymore. Who is it? Celine shakily asked. Dr. Irwin moved with such frightening precision, and his possessed eyes locked onto the woman. Oh, don't you know, McGinnis? He asked gleefully. You've read his word. Celine shivered. I only read a small segment, it was. Beautiful, Irwin finished, brandishing bloody teeth. Celine and I took steps backwards, casting petrified looks at one another. I was grateful at that moment for her sharp thinking, grateful that she had summoned the strength to shred the note before passing the point of no return, before entirely losing herself. As I stared at the paper pile beneath Irwin's feet, I wondered just how much of the maker's writings he had consumed. Above all else, I cursed myself for my curiosity. In spite of Celine's warning, I wanted so desperately to know what was written on the countless notes in the house. But I valued my sense of self, valued it enough to resist that inky siren song. What did you do, Alec? Celine cried. You really don't know. The man whispered, eyes still not seeing us. He had ascended to another plane of existence. Whatever he had seen or felt was all that mattered to him anymore. Dr. Irwin was lost to the white abyss. Celine and I had to leave. "We're going, Alec," I said. "I'm not," he replied, laughing awfully. "No, I don't think you should," I said. "Don't you want to know?" he said, raising the red-stained skull above his head. "Don't you want to hear a secret about my trophy?" "Come on," Celine urged, tugging my sleeve. "Let's go." "This is me, Captain Beckinsale." Irwin cackled, thrusting his trophy into my arms as tears streamed from his bloodshot eyes. "A remnant of my physical form." Clattering sounded, and we gawped in horror as the demented man lunged towards us. Following him in a trail on the wooden floor was a pile of bones that had leaked from his body. Detached sections of his skeleton fell through his flesh as he walked. The bones did not fall through gaping wounds but immaterial skin. The man's body was an ethereal, spectral form. Irwin's blood-covered bones and red grin were the only drops of color in that white place. His broken skeleton formed a revolting line from the pile of paper to his ghostly body. And as I thought back to moments earlier, when I put my hand on the man's shoulder, I realized that I hadn't felt anything at all. "Consume oneself," he whispered, presumably reciting what he had read. "That is how I grew." I have no idea how a person would devour their own body, no idea how they would transcend their physical form by doing so, and I didn't want to know. Celine sobbed as I snatched her hand and then pulled her towards the exit. Perhaps she had an inkling. Perhaps she had seen something which would explain how Dr. Irwin feasted upon himself. I took one look over my shoulder and winced in terror at the abomination who charged towards us with one hand outstretched. "Don't leave," the man roared. "I must reach the next plane, must feast again so I may reshape all." I pushed Celine through the doorway, preventing her from turning her head. I tried to ignore the gliding entity that had once been our determined but still human leader. And when we had reached the final room, I fixed my eyes onto the globe of reality. I considered our next move, while Celine peered over my shoulder with a horrified look. She choked. "We need to touch it," I said bluntly. "We need to touch the globe." With my hand still holding hers, I guided both of us towards the crystal sphere. It was the only way. I didn't know how I knew that, but I did. I hadn't read a single word of the letters other than the maker's question, but I knew. The bellowing roar of Irwin, who I could feel reaching towards us, disappeared as Celine and I faded from white to black. Back into that stuck realm of reality we had at first found beyond the edge. A door which led to the house stood several hundred yards from our frozen spacecraft. Celine and I stood in the middle. "How do we escape?" she asked as we ran towards the Victoria, which was still cemented in the black void. "We activate the E-warp with reverse thrusters," I said. Her eyes widened, given that the E-warp hadn't been cleared for use, but she didn't call me mad. Didn't protest as we entered the vehicle and I beelined towards the flight deck. She knew as well as I did that nothing was mad in that place. I fired up a dozen Minus's experimental feature, one that might have ended in catastrophic failure. It was the only idea that I had, as the main thruster hadn't managed to budge the vehicle an inch. I set the craft into reverse thrust, activated the E-warp, and screamed alongside Celine as our bodies were nearly wrenched from existence. Reality stretched into eternity around us, and I thought that we might be torn into nothing. However, it wasn't the pain that frightened me. It was the face which filled the blackness ahead. something that had followed us from the white into the black. Dr. Irwin. The man, no more than a disembodied head of biblical proportions, brandished his threatening maw, a toothless mouth no longer grinning, that rushed forwards in a bid to consume us as I frantically thrust the lever away from me, begging the ship to perform as I asked. There was a nightmarish moment staring down the gullet of our potential bloody ends, but then the ship moved. Reality contorted us excruciatingly, and we propelled backwards, and then the ship's radar burst into action as we returned to something that could be measured. We returned to the universe, to whatever lies within the crystal globe. It was a quiet journey home. 1 year of trying my best to help Celine heal. She berated herself for making only slight progress, but it was gargantuan in my eyes. We returned to Earth in late October 2023 and told NASA only a fraction of what happened beyond reality. Told them that Dr. Irwin perished, which was more of a white lie than an outright fib. We still had his skull to prove our story. The woman that I loved is only a husk of her former self, but she's come a long way. Selena's been fighting to recover, and I do see glimmers of joy in her quite often. I hope those glimmers become longer and longer as time passes. But there are, of course, dark days, and there always will be. Days in which she blankly eyes something in the distance, something that I don't see, perhaps can't see. And I know that it's linked to the terrible truths that she had learned in the beyond. Regardless, she is still Celine. Dr. Alec Irwin, on the other hand, died the second that we had crossed the edge. What terrifies me more than anything is knowing that humans are not the only fragile things in reality. Reality itself is fragile. A glassy globe that, right this very moment, is eyed by a ghoul and a house beyond reality. Its crystal structure could be shattered in an instant, and all would cease to be. I'm not sure how smart giving out personal information is after something I thought could only happen in movies actually happened. But I'm scared about what this all could mean, and I want people to hear and know about this if something happens to me. I assure you that I am on no medication, suffer from no mental illnesses, and have no trauma of any kind and anything else that you might think of. I am a completely average person living a completely average life. Well, I was, I guess, up until now. My name is Marielle, and I'm from a small town in Georgia where everybody knows each other, and I work as a 911 operator. My family lives in a rural town out of state, and I haven't spoken to them about this yet out of fear that whatever's going on might somehow affect them too if I get them involved. Yesterday, I began my night shift the same way that I do every evening. Most of the time, I get low-priority calls and a few pranks, and since I've been doing this for a few years now, I've grown quite good at discerning what's an actual concerning call. The shift was rather tame up until I got what I thought was a prank call. 911, what's your emergency? I spoke into the phone after returning my cup of coffee back on the desk and readjusting myself.
Somebody's outside my house. They've been looking around my yard and windows for the past 2 minutes.
It was a woman on the other end. Her voice familiar ever since the first few words, but I couldn't quite place it yet. She spoke very fast, and it was obvious how nervous she was about this. No surprise there, I would be too.
I thought it was some friend, but I don't know this person and they look off.
Okay, ma'am. Nudging my chair closer to the desk as I begin typing on the computer. I asked the lady another question in the meantime. Can you give me your address and tell me if you can see if this person is armed?
Yeah, I'm in the yellow house at.
he... The woman continued, but I admit I didn't listen. She had just given my house address. I stopped my fingers in the middle of writing and I sighed, thinking that this had to be one of my friends. We're a small bunch and very mischievous towards each other, sort of out of character for our age, I must admit. But I've said numerous times how serious prank calling 911 can be for people. Who is this? You know how badly this can end for you, right? I reached for my coffee cup, rolling my eyes and held my hand ready to hang up the call, but she continued. What? I don't get it. I'm serious, please don't hang up. She retorted in a tone that caught me off guard. And then again after a second, she returned to the previous somewhat panicked attitude. I'm sorry, but this isn't a joke. Please, I'm afraid of what this person might do. Okay, ma'am. I put the cup back on the desk and was ready to prolong this call to enough of an extent to make this woman face the consequences for holding the line. What bad luck for her, I thought, to get the operator living at the exact house she decided would be her target. What's your name and which room are you in right now? I'm Mary Allen. I'm looking out my bedroom window right now. They're still there. My blood started to boil. How senseless this person must be. It was obviously a friend. I raised my voice this time, warning them again about how badly they will regret their actions if they prank call again. And just as I was about to hang up, Marielle started to beg me frantically not to. For whatever reason, something inside me was telling me to listen. I decided to give her one more chance and then I would send the police over to arrest this prank caller and at the very least, give her a slap on the wrist. Okay, Marielle, describe the bedroom to me. What? You heard me. What color are the curtains? Is there any furniture or lamps? Tell me what you can see. Though I've known said friends for quite a while now, none of them have ever been in my house. I prefer it that way not because I don't trust them to enter my home, but because I've never been fond of having guests. Neither did my parents when I was little. It's something that they had that is transferred over to me. There's no way that this person would. Purple curtains, a double bed with a grayish cover with white lines, a wardrobe and a small bedside table with a nightlamp on it. She went on for a few seconds while I listened, completely dumbfounded. She was describing exactly how my bedroom looked. Her next words snapped me out of the confusion. Miss, why are you asking me this? There's somebody outside my house. I couldn't answer her immediately. This was all so surreal. Nothing like anything that I had experienced so far on this job. This woman apparently named Marielle, who sounds just like me, claiming she lives at my address and is standing in the exact same bedroom as mine, was talking to me, Marielle. How did any of this make sense? I tried to keep my cool and continue talking to her normally, but I could hear the shakiness in my own voice when all I could mutter was an "okay, ma'am," before falling silent again, and I rummaged around my desk drawer to find my personal phone. My ex-husband had installed security cameras facing the front, back, and sides of her house at different angles after some people had started talking about the same car driving around their homes multiple times during the day and night. But nothing ever came out of it. It didn't hurt to have the extra security measure, but I never thought that I would actually have to use it. I opened the app while this Marielle kept repeating, "Hello?" but I was too preoccupied to answer. I admit my heart had dropped into my stomach at this point, and it only got worse after I had opened the camera app. My bedroom window looked out on one of the sides of my house, and right beyond the wooden fence was somebody pacing left and right while looking up at the house. I finally snapped back. Okay, Marielle, okay, I'm sending a patrol car your way immediately. Excuse the holdup. I tried to regain my composure but could still hear my words trembling as I spoke them out loud. While the person wasn't trespassing and technically not committing any crime, what puzzled me more was that I was currently completely free of any alcohol or drug influence, talking to myself, to another me. Move away from the window to make sure that he doesn't see you. Do you? I paused for a moment, taking in how ridiculous the whole situation was again, and finished my question. listening intently for the answer that was about to come from the other Marielle. Not sure what I was expecting to hear. Do you have a weapon in your house that you could use in case his intentions become malevolent?
I mean, the only thing I can think of right now are the knives in the kitchen. And there's an old pistol, but it's in the basement and the door to it is outside. Am I going to have to defend myself?
She sounded stressed out as she asked, but I was more shocked to hear the same exact words that I would have said in response to this question. I have a pistol and it's in the basement, the door to which is outside. Still unable to comprehend all of this, I told Marielle, or me I guess, to check again to see where the person is, and reassured her that the patrol car is only a few minutes away from the house. Only now did I finally look around, thinking that I must be dreaming, and I caught the gaze of a fellow coworker who had his eyebrow raised. He must have been listening into my conversation and seen me acting off, but I tried to smile to the best of my ability and nod, quickly returning my focus to my screen before I could see his reaction. "Marielle, do you see them still?" I inquired but got no response for another few moments. She then stumbled on her words and I could hear the door creaking open just as my bedroom door did, and her footsteps rapidly moving from room to room, presumably looking out the other windows.
No, he's not out there now. I don't know where he is. Oh God, did I miss him? Is he coming towards my house?
She sounded like she was on the verge of a panic attack. I did my best trying to calm her down while searching for the person myself, switching between different cameras, and when I found him I saw him in the backyard, with an arm raised in the middle of the air. Moments later, a rock flew towards my kitchen window, and though the cameras have no audio to them, Marielle's shriek was perfectly timed in sync with the impact.
Holy crap, he just broke one of my windows.
She yelled frantically and began raving inaudibly into the phone. Marielle, get to your attic, quickly. The police will be at your place soon. Use anything you find up there to block the way in. I yelled back, raising my voice loud enough to overshadow hers, and to probably scare my coworkers with the sudden decibel increase. Whatever was happening, it was real. There was someone outside my house who had just broken a window and I was in there, afraid for my life. The advice that I gave her was exactly what I would have done. The attic hatch is in the middle of the hallway leading from the living room to my bedroom, giving her enough time to get up there and block it afterwards, considering this person had to pass through the kitchen and then through the aforementioned parts of the house. By my calculations, Marielle had enough time to get there and use all the pent-up trash and whatever else she could find to hold the hatch shut for the little time left that the police needed to arrive. I could hear Marielle slam the door behind her and run down the laminated hallway towards the hatch, and then I gasped audibly as she yelled into the speaker, and the phone dropped with a loud thud, her footsteps becoming more and more distant as another heavier set made their way faster and faster through the hallway and closer to the phone. "Are you still there? The police are almost at your location," was all that I could think to say in my last effort to scare whoever this person was away. A few seconds of silence and I expected to hear something, anything. Some scary or cryptid remark or at least breathing. But there was nothing. My last word into the receiver was an empty hello before the other end hung up. I couldn't believe what had just happened and I must have sat at my desk staring into the screen for at least 2 minutes before the same coworker from before, Connor, came and put his hand on my shoulder, prompting me to scream and push him away. The entire office looked our way and he put his hands up in the air. I apologized profusely more times than I could count. Everyone turned back to their desks and Connor lowered his hands. "Tough call?" he asked and leaned to my desk, handed me a chocolate bar. "You seemed really on edge the entire time and well, this just confirms it." I didn't even acknowledge the snack after I looked at it and just met his eyes again, not knowing what to say. I began with a few disconnected words before excusing myself and leaving the shift early. It's a little after 2:30 as I finish writing this. I booked myself a room into the most crowded hotel that I could find with the room closest to the stairs leading to the reception, shutting the blinds and locking the door twice. I'm afraid to go home, and I don't know who to talk to about this without sounding completely insane. I've heard nothing from the responding police officers yet, and I don't know what to do about this tomorrow. Anybody reading this or listening, please believe me. And even if you don't, can you please offer me some advice? I just woke up and it's 4:16. 5 minutes ago, 2 calls from somebody with no caller ID woke me up, but I didn't pick up. I'm afraid for my safety. I sat in the cushioned armchair in the hotel room that Marielle had rented after running off inexplicably from her shift last night. I called earlier this morning after finishing work without even going to sleep. She's always been level-headed, and her acting like this made me feel concerned. I couldn't just let her go, and now here I was, listening to how she apparently spoke to herself last night on the phone. Marielle, are you sure these night shifts aren't a bit too much for you? Though I wanted to trust her, what she was describing to me sounded straight out of a book or a movie, and the lack of sleep really takes a toll too big for you to even comprehend. I'm not saying you're making this up, but maybe just you remembered it wrong. Marielle paced around the room with one hand resting on her hip and the other held up to her forehead, pushing her hair back, and she exhaled loudly. I know this sounds insane, Connor, but I'm telling you, I'm 100% certain about what I heard and saw on those cameras. There was another me in that house last night, and some person broke my window. How can you be taking this so calmly? We haven't even heard from the responders yet, and it's been more than 6 hours. She was right. There had been no info back to us on that call, nothing on the news, no contact from the officers. When I used Marielle's phone to try and call back whoever it was that woke her up, there was nothing. I told her that while I can't explain the call itself, I agreed that it was too dangerous for her to go back home considering that there was an intruder. I offered her to stay at my place for the next few days, and while she agreed and thanked me, she wouldn't let the topic of her other self go. I understood her to some extent, but I was still skeptical. And so I offered her to go back to my place so that I could change and grab the pistol that I kept locked in my safe and a flashlight, and then we could go and look for the officers at her house ourselves. She was afraid, but I think the curiosity and stress about what might have happened to the supposed other her prevailed, and was what had made her agree to this plan. I waited for her to get her things out of the room, and I drove back to my house, in the meantime asking her about any details she might have missed about the call to make sure that we were going in prepared. The drive to her house wasn't long, and during it, I tried to play some music to lighten the mood or talk to her about anything that I could to distract her, but all I got was 1 or 2 words in response, while she was lost in thought looking out the window. When we arrived, I parked in her driveway where, just outside, sat the policeman's car, with the 2 front doors slightly ajar but no sign of them. Marielle's breathing fastened, and I put a hand on her shoulder to calm her down, and then without anything being said between the both of us, we got out of the car. The first thing we did was walk up to the police car and see if there was anything out of the ordinary, like slashed tires or any signs of a struggle. But it was parked there like any other vehicle, and there was nothing obvious on the inside. What I discovered though was the radio, which while it didn't look like it had been tampered with, was not working. I walked back towards the house and called for Marielle to walk with me as we circled it from afar, finding the broken window leading into the kitchen. I was just about to suggest calling 911 again and have them go into the house while we wait outside, but Marielle snapped before I could even begin to speak. Why is nothing being done about this? She raised her hands in the air and turned to look at me, her blue eyes conveying a mixture of anger and confusion. 2 policemen have disappeared since responding to this call. There was an intruder in my home, and there was literally a clone or something of me inside while I was at work. Tell me why we haven't heard anything about this, Connor. I don't know, okay? If anything happened like you say it did, it just doesn't make sense. I cut her off before she started talking again, knowing that she would jump me for accusing her of lying. But we really should let the authorities handle this. We're not professionals. Marielle tried to get something out, but just cut herself off and shook her head. I thought that she had given in and would do the logical thing and take my advice. Instead, she turned and walked a few steps towards her back door and then looked back at me. "What are you doing?" "I'm going in. No one's gonna listen to me anyway, and I'm not about to leave here without at least some kind of answer or clue." I stared at her, completely taken aback, and I waited a few seconds to see if she would say anything else, but she just stayed there looking right at me. I knew deep down she was hoping that I would say that I'm going in with her. Well, before I did that, I tried to convince her to think this through again, but that was obviously not going to work. So that's just what I did, but I have to admit I was getting nervous myself. The back door was unlocked and led into a different hallway than the one that she had told me about, which I figured out by the lack of an attic hatch. Mario told me the layout of her home and we walked together, me in front and with my gun drawn as I called out asking if anybody was there. She smacked my shoulder and raised her arms with wide eyes and I shushed her. We had no way of knowing if there was an intruder or police officers, or both, and I didn't want blood on my hands, no matter whose. As you might expect, we got no response from anywhere and heard nothing that might indicate that there was anybody else in there with us. We found nothing out of the ordinary in the rooms of Marielle's home, but the hallway with the attic had some things worth noting. The first being what we immediately saw: the phone on the ground, and slight marks like scratches on the walls, which were the only signs of anything out of the ordinary. Well, besides the broken window. "That must be what she used to call. It's identical to mine." She grabbed it and tried turning it on, but it had no battery left. The screen was slightly cracked at the top right edge, probably where it had first impacted the floor. "What is going on, Connor?" "Calm down," I began, knowing that she wouldn't listen. "There's only the attic and the basement left for us to look through. We can check up there and then go down last. How's that sound?" "Yeah, okay, but the basement's locked. If the key hasn't been moved, it must be in one of my bedroom drawers." "All right, I'll check out the attic while you go get the key. There's no point in both of us going up there." I raised the gun in the air while reaching for my flashlight. "And don't worry about me." Marielle nodded and began walking towards the bedroom, disappearing past the door after I had started ascending into the attic. There was nothing on top of the hatch, which I realized before even looking around to see because of how easily I was able to lift it open, confirming our suspicions that the other woman hadn't made it up there before the end of the call. What immediately struck me as odd was the immediate drop in temperature here. I mean, yeah, it was an attic, but the difference must have been at least 10 degrees, and I shivered as I made my way up and started shining the light across the entire space. Behind empty old boxes, worn-out furniture, and the various other items not worth noting, there was no place for anyone to hide up here, or at least, not if you ask me, because I looked through every nook and cranny there was and found no traces of anyone or anything. Walking back, I started descending the ladder and called for Marielle, but I got no response. I wasn't immediately concerned because the hatch was left open, and if anything had happened, I would have heard it. Waiting for a few seconds and remaining without a response, I made my way towards the bedroom, which was just as empty as when we looked in there together earlier. I called out for her again and started looking through each of the rooms, and while doing that, I paused for a moment to listen, but not for Marielle. The background noises from earlier, like birds or passing cars, had all stopped. Again, that didn't strike me as odd at that moment. Looking through the rest of the rooms proved fruitless, and I thought that maybe she had gone outside, probably waiting for me by the basement. And so I made my way to the back door and I opened it. It led me back into the living room. I blinked and looked behind me. I was certainly in the same corridor that we were first in when entering the house. Despite that, I shut the door and turned back to exit from the front of the house. And when I opened that one, I was greeted with the kitchen. I just stood there for a few seconds, unable to take in what was happening, and I rubbed my eyes, but here I was, still inside the house, standing right at the front door, which was leading me back inside. I walked through and approached the window that was broken by the intruder. Instead of the green yard, the street with parked cars and neighboring houses, I was greeted by a view into the bedroom. My heart started pounding, and I admit that I was on the verge of a panic attack. I started sweating profusely, and my heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest as I began running from room to room, door through door, trying to get out and again finding myself in different parts of the house. I had to stop and sit down for a few moments before I would pass out, and while regaining my composure, I saw something odd. Not that this whole situation wasn't far more disturbing than I'm giving it credit for. I noticed that the walls of the living room where I was currently sitting had changed color, and half the table was just missing. Like, imagine a bug or a glitch in some video game where half a piece of furniture is there and the rest is gone. The table still had two of its legs on which it was standing completely fine, but the surface was cut diagonally and the rest of it just wasn't even there. I waved my hand through where it was supposed to be and they just swiped right through the air. I continued walking through different rooms and the changes began getting more and more apparent. Like the chandelier in the kitchen was upside down and sitting in the middle of the air attached to nothing. It was physically there, and when I tried pushing it, it wouldn't move, but I could feel and touch it. I don't know how long I spent in this place, but for the first time in what was now feeling like hours, I heard a noise. Breathing. Rapid, scared breathing just like mine when I found myself here. It was coming from the neighboring room. I couldn't say which one, as by now it had been a gamble where I would stumble at. I ended up appearing back into the bedroom where I was greeted by a gruesome sight of a tall man with torn clothing and wounds, superficial and deep all over his body, lying in a messy pool of red and something dark mixed with it, some of which was splattered on the wall behind him, where I saw the same scratch marks as the ones on the walls of the hallway before. It was as if I had an instantaneous flashback after seeing him. What remained of his clothing was the same as what the person who broke into Marielle's home was wearing. He was still alive, but his eyes were red and he screamed as he saw me. I did the same in reaction. No, get away from me. He yelled through pained inhales and tried to muster up strength to throw one of his shoes at me, but it only got over his leg and was barely any further away from him. Get away! I'm not going to hurt you. Look, You're not real. Taking the risk of giving him a heart attack that would finally take him out of his misery, I rushed by his side and held my hands in the air, yelling loud enough to silence him. I started shooting every question that I could think of at him, and when he stopped trying to talk over me, I grabbed him by the shoulders, shaking him. He looked as if he was about to faint any moment now, and I asked him what this place was, why he broke in, if he knows Marielle, and I could barely get any coherent response out of him until he grabbed my right arm with a strength that he didn't look like he had, which left me shocked and silent. During my time of silence, he spoke. Not people. Fake. Before I could inquire, he could reveal more himself, I was suddenly thrown into the wall next to the man. I couldn't even yell in reaction to the pain. Another blow struck me right in the ribs, and the pain was so unexpected and strong that I held my eyes shut and clutched at my sides. Amidst the chaos, I could hear the man scream, and suddenly what I assume happened was that he got thrown away. His screams continued but faded in the distance, and I heard a crash and glass breaking. Mere moments later, just as I was about to open my eyes, I was grabbed by one of my arms and flung right back out of the room's door. Suddenly, all the noise stopped and I stayed curled in a ball on the floor, tears of pain streaming down my cheeks as I held my hands over where I had been kicked or punched or whatever happened. I assumed that I had at least 2 broken ribs and I could barely touch the area without sharp pain coming in. When I opened my eyes, I found myself back in the attic, but this time I could hear Marielle yelling for me downstairs. I slowly got myself back up, holding my side while descending back down into the corridor. I could hear that the neighborhood sounds had returned. I'm here, I shouted and sat on the floor while waiting for her to arrive. When she did, she gasped and ran at me, putting a hand on my shoulder asking me what had happened and how I got hurt. We have to get out of here. She helped me get up, allowing me to lean over on her as we started walking out. I'll explain it at the hotel. I allowed her to drive and she kept asking me questions in the meantime, but I was too exhausted and in pain to respond coherently. We arrived at the parking lot and she turned to face me, looking me in the eyes and saying something that I didn't even register at that point. I was too caught up in a small detail that I knew that I would have noticed for all the time that I've known her. Marielle, since when are your eyes two different colors? I couldn't find the key to the basement no matter where I looked in the bedroom. I don't remember misplacing it, but with everything that's happened in the past 12 or so hours, I wasn't about to question something as mundane as this. Afraid to go too far without Connor, I decided to wait by the ladder up to the attic for him to finish searching, and maybe join him if he found something. But when I stopped to listen, I could hear no footsteps or any noise coming from up there. "Connor?" I called while looking up at the darkness above me. Seeing no ray of light from his flashlight either, but I heard him speak to me and figured that he must be quite a way inside. "I'm up here." His voice was flat and it just sounded strange and not quite like him, but I choked it up to the way that sound carried itself from above to the hallway. "Come up, I found something." "What's up?" I asked, starting to climb the ladder but didn't get the answer that I expected. Actually, I got no answer at all. "Connor?" I called again with my head now poking up into the attic and I finished descending. I cleaned my hands of the dust and shivered from how cold it was up here, and then I looked around and found myself completely in the dark, with no light coming from anywhere. Something felt wrong and I wasn't sure if the next chill that ran through my body was from the cold or my intuition. I didn't wait around to find out and quickly climbed back down into the hallway where the cold of the attic followed me. It was strange to say the least. It wasn't like that before when I had gone up there. I waited for a little while wondering what had caused Connor to behave so unlike himself. The cold was too much and I began feeling uncomfortable. So while waiting for him, I decided that I would go back into the bedroom to grab a jacket. But upon opening the door, I was greeted to my living room. I don't think that I need to describe to you how I felt at that moment, but I began growing more and more concerned as I wandered from room to room and found myself in an impossible loop of my own home, to which I was now like a mouse to a trap. Occasionally, after going through each room so many times, I could hear sounds that didn't seem to fit, and objects denying reality itself. Windows had been placed on ceilings looking into nothing, furniture floating in the middle of the air or clipping into the floor. A reality show playing in the middle of my kitchen in which there was no TV. To say the least, I was terrified and convinced that I would never make it out of here, as everything only seemed to get worse and only that much more confusing. And no matter how much time I spent looking in each room, I would move to the next and I would find nothing that even hinted at a way of getting out of this maze. Adrenaline flooded my body in the middle of my search of the kitchen when I heard footsteps and increasingly louder static mixed with a voice constantly changing its pitch, but not in a regular way. Rather, this voice was constantly swapping between male and female. There was nowhere in the kitchen to hide, so the only thing that I could do was hide behind the counter on the other side and stay as silent as I could be, considering the circumstances. I covered my mouth and still feared the sound of my heart pounding would be enough to give me away. The three sounds moved closer and closer together and eventually reached the kitchen. The footsteps came to a stop, but what I was hearing disturbed me in a way that nothing had been able to in all my time alive. What I heard, presumably coming from the entrance to the kitchen, was like I said, a voice swapping between that of a man and a woman, mixed in with radio static, citing yesterday's news and then the weather report, random conversations and then something all too familiar.
911, what's your emergency?
It was my voice. My breathing froze and I slowly looked up without revealing myself from the counter, expecting whatever was here in the kitchen with me to be looking down like in a horror movie, but thankfully there was nothing. The voice continued, swapping between the voices of two other men, mine and out of nowhere, Connor's.
Marielle, since when are your eyes two different colors?
I widened my eyes in disbelief and covered my mouth with both hands, praying whatever this was would leave. The static grew louder first, and then it began stopping and starting again at random intervals, while this thing continued repeating the same phrase over and over again. It was sickening to listen to.
Marielle, since when are your eyes two different colors?
By now, the voices had stopped swapping, and only Connor's was the one repeating this. And then, just as suddenly as it arrived, the footsteps began walking in the opposite direction, and the phrase fading into the otherwise silent house. I was so petrified by what had just happened that I couldn't bring myself to get up for another few minutes, and I had to keep myself from crying. After spending enough time with just myself and no inexplicable sounds showing up, I stood upright again and looked around to find that I was alone. It finally dawned on me that because of the state of panic that I was in, I had completely forgotten the most obvious part of the kitchen, the window that the intruder broke to get inside. It was still shattered, but unlike most of the other windows that looked into nothing or just walls, beyond it was my bedroom and the sight of a body on the ground that I couldn't recognize. I yelped when I saw it, and then noticed that it was lying in a pool of red. I crawled through the window and approached it slowly. Being able to get closer to it allowed me to see that its clothes, though torn and bloody, were the same as the ones the man who had broken my window was wearing. The realization made me stop in my tracks for a moment before resuming my crawl towards them. It was a man whose face I could not see. It was turned away from me, and the hood of the gray hoodie, or what remained of it, was still up. There must have been some kind of fight with someone or something, because over his legs was my bedside table, with the lamp broken on the ground and glass scattered all around. Carefully kneeling down as to not cut myself, I turned the man's head towards me, revealing the wide-eyed, bloody face of somebody that I knew all too well. Lying before me, dead on the ground after breaking into my home, was my ex-husband, Russell. I never talked about Russell much to anyone after we had finalized our divorce. I had long since been emotionally detached from him after 2 years of growing neglect that made us argue more and more every day, and we would end up not talking to each other for weeks after some of the fights. Everything started as what I first thought was a way for him to try and scare me, as he knew that I had always been afraid of anything horror-related. So he found it funny to occasionally read out a scary story or pop out of a corner to see my reaction. I never paid him much mind and only laughed it off when he started talking about the other side and the mirror people. But he kept getting more and more interested in it until that was everything that he would talk about from day to night, sometimes not even sleeping to continue what he called his research, and what I found to be mindless scrolling on the internet and reading made-up articles about some made-up thing to scare teenagers and gullible minds. Now, after everything that I had seen and gone through, I remembered all of it for the first time in a few months, after I had been able to bury it in my mind. I don't know what he was doing here, or why he was trying to break into my home, and how he ended up like this. So many thoughts flooded through my head instantly, most of them grief and confusion, but I had no time to process any of them as I jumped back at the sight, and a piece of glass pierced through my right palm and I let out an involuntary yelp. Just as I did that, I immediately heard the same sounds from earlier, footsteps and voices with static mixed in, repeating random words and phrases. But this time there was more than one, and they were coming right towards me. I turned to my bed and I rushed to hide under it, having no time to get to the wardrobe or try and make my way back through the window and into the kitchen. The covers were hanging loosely and covered half the space below the bed, so if I stayed quiet, I would have a chance to go unnoticed. The unearthly sights kept coming. Rushing into the bedroom were 3 men, 2 in police uniforms whose movements were unnaturally stiff and their faces expressionless, their eyes not even moving. And the third was not Connor. I mean, it looked like him, it had his face, but his expression was constantly changing, From a smile to nothing to a grimace to sadness, to every single emotion that you could think of. His clothes were the ones that I had seen him in when he changed after he went to his house, only their colors were changing rapidly. And then in the blink of an eye he was wearing a suit, again the colors changing and mixing. What terrified me the most about the view was his limbs. Like I mentioned, the policemen were totally stiff and unmoving. But this Connor's look-alike limbs were spasming and flying around in movements the human body simply couldn't perform. One moment his arm was by his side and the next it was raised backwards 90 degrees. Instantly afterwards pointing forward and then clipping into his body before returning to normal again. And his head snapped violently from side to side, as if his neck were constantly breaking and repairing itself. Their presence brought with them the static. But once they had entered the room, the voices had stopped, and they just sat there for about half a minute before the static began ringing so loud that I almost had to cover my ears, and then the three just disappeared. They were gone as if they had never been there. I waited to see if anything would return again or if I would hear any noises, but the only thing was total silence and the body of my ex-husband uncomfortably close to me while I was hiding. I crawled out from under the bed and took one more look at him before quickly jumping through the window and into the kitchen again. Only this time it led me back into the hallway with the attic. There was sure to be emotional fallout from this, but my brain was not letting me process it now. Before I could even look around, I was tackled by something into the wall and my mouth was covered, preventing me from screaming no matter how I tried. I started throwing my hands erratically into this thing, trying to hit it and make it release me, but it only began shushing me and reduced the strength of its grip. I opened my eyes to see Connor, bruised and disheveled, his clothes dirty and stained with blood. He stared at me and spoke, blue eyes, and then looked at my bloody hand and let me go, before that pressing a finger to his lips, telling me to stay silent. Seeing him so beat up while the rest of those things looked, well, completely abnormal and impossible to even exist, and considering the fact that he was not the actual Connor and wanted to harm me, it had the opportunity to but didn't. Connor? I whispered and eyed him up and down. He really had had it rough somewhere. Is it you, the real you? Yes, quiet. Marielle, something's here and it's not human. Connor was more afraid than I had ever seen him, and he gave the impression of somebody who was not easy to scare. We need to find a way out. How did you end up here, from the attic? Yeah, the first time. The first time? After making sure we heard none of those things approaching and looked through the window in each of the doors, Connor and I sat in the middle of the hallway where he explained to me how he had been attacked by something after finding the intruder, and was thrown back into what we assume was reality, where I found him and we drove back to the hotel. That's where he had seen that my eyes were different colors, and bringing it up caused this other Marielle to begin distorting her limbs, and just like I had seen the other Connor do, and her head had started to twitch. Before he could get out of the car, she lunged at him from the driver's seat, and he woke up again in the middle of the living room. We were able to mutually shock each other, him with his experience and me with the fact that this intruder was my ex-husband. So why did he break into your home? Does he hate you or did he want to hurt you? No, it was obvious to me that he still loved me even after all the arguments and the divorce. I was the one that ended things. But he had spoken about the other side and the mirror people. That's what he called them. I blinked and moved my eyes from staring into the wall that was not the right color to look at Connor. I think that he knew something about this and he was trying to warn me. We sat in thought for a little while longer before he got up and helped me off the floor. We have to find a way out fast, Marielle. The door we went through led us into my bathroom, or this place's version of it. It looked exactly like it normally does, which was unusual aside from one thing, and that was the mirror, which did not have its usual reflective surface, but it was instead looking into another bathroom. We looked around thoroughly first before I helped Connor climb up the sink and he crawled through. The second he did, however, he disappeared and I was left all alone again. Afraid to turn back and unsure of what else to do, I started making my way onto the sink with one leg and through the mirror with the rest of my body. Halfway through, I turned in reaction to hearing an ear-piercing scream coming from a woman mixed with the undertone of a male voice and that static. Charging through the door of the bathroom and right at me was me. The other Marielle's eyes were wide and her mouth open as loud as it could humanly go, and she grabbed me by my ankle and began pulling me back in. I held on to the edges and screamed, using my other leg to kick at her hands, but she wouldn't let go, only intensifying these inhuman screams that will forever haunt my nightmares. Despite that, I continued trying while looking around to see if there was anything on the sink that might help me, and I saw the glass cup that I used to keep my toothbrush in. I grabbed it and used all my strength to slam it into the other Marielle's head, shattering it. A final kick into her face was enough to force her to release me, and I made the rest of my way into the mirror, her screams stopping as if I had just woken up from a dream. I dropped down onto the floor with a loud thud, immediately pushing myself back up against the wall and hyperventilating while Connor looked at me unsure of what to do. "Hey, what the heck happened? Why did it take you so long?" He knelt by my side and winced in pain, putting his left hand over his ribs. "Well, the other me dang near dragged me back in." "Holy, well, you don't have to worry about that, I think. Look." Connor pointed to the mirror after my breathing slowly started to go back to normal, and I only saw pitch black in it. "Looks like we found the way out." "How do you know that we're out?" "Listen, there's noises outside. You hear those construction workers, the cars." I nodded and took in the sounds that he was describing. I don't know if you noticed, but there's none of that in there. I stood up and approached it, not daring to put my hand through, but stared into the black void. I would describe what I was seeing as impossible, but considering everything that had gone down just now, I don't think that that word has any meaning anymore. "We need to get out of this house before we get trapped again. Is your car still outside?" I asked as I opened the door leading out into the hallway, making sure to check beforehand. The house looked completely normal. "No, I don't know where it is. Maybe still at the hotel, or honestly, I have no idea. I just showed up here again after being attacked by whatever that thing pretending to be you was." My car was at the hotel also, at least that's where I left it after ending my shift early following that call. So we decided to call a taxi to get us to Connor's house where we could both take a break and get fixed up, hopefully without having to worry about being pulled into another dimension, or whatever the place that we were trapped in was. After I took a shower, Connor went to rest, and he made sure that he had no wounds that he was missing. I had wrapped my hand in bandages before using his laptop, with his permission of course, to do some research on what Russell had been so obsessed with all that time ago. The weight of finding the man that I had spent so much time in love with dead in a place that couldn't exist still hadn't come down on me, but at least it allowed me to remain focused. Looking up Mirror People and The Other Side together yielded scattered and terribly written posts with grammar and spelling mistakes, packed with action scenes that were obviously works of fiction by people who had stumbled upon something similar online. But one of the top results was an actually well put together website describing these entities as another me, documenting reports of people seeing and hearing, talking and even interacting with themselves. But by the time it had reached that point, no more updates had been posted. I showed the website to Connor and he browsed through it, finding something that I hadn't looked for yet at the bottom corner of the page. It was the creator of the website's name, a middle-aged woman by the name of Rebecca Simmons, and contact information about her email, encouraging people who have an experience to share to contact her. We have nothing to lose, right? I mean, this all sounds completely insane and psychotic, but we just went through it, and this woman is probably the only person ready to believe us right off the bat. Connor looked at me again, but suddenly his eyes trailed towards my injured hand. "Sure. Are you going to write that email or should I?" Connor didn't reply and he seemed zoned out. "What's wrong?" "Marielle, what's happening to your hand?" I looked at my injured hand and gasped. and then quickly lifted up the leg of my pants to see the same thing on my ankle. At the same time, Connor lifted one side of his shirt enough to see where he had been attacked. My hand, ankle, and that part of Connor's torso were pitch black. An excruciatingly long day full of fear and anxiety passed before we heard back from Rebecca. She had messaged us asking to meet in person after we had described our situation in detail, but warned us in advance that she does not know how helpful she would be. The drive to the address that she had given us was about an hour and a half away in Augusta, where she had a small apartment that she was staying at currently. Connor and I walked to the hotel to find my car still there, but his had disappeared. We kept a close eye on our wounds and bruises, unsure of what they actually were, and if they could spread. We were relieved to see that they still hadn't. I would like to say we discussed theories and possible reasons for why this was happening, and why to us, but we were so afraid and exhausted by now that we barely said anything to each other. I had spoken to my family on the phone earlier and had to pretend that everything was okay, when deep down I wanted to cry into the receiver to my mother and ask her what to do. Anything we tried to find regarding the missing police officers who responded to the call that night online was met with old articles that coincidentally had some of the same keywords that I had used in my search. There was nothing on the news either. It was as if nothing had happened at all. We arrived in Augusta a little after noon and turned from the main street to town into another narrow road that led to Rebecca's neighborhood. We climbed up to the third floor and rang her bell. Footsteps approaching the door a few moments later and stopping, presumably looking through the large peephole before she opened the door to greet us. What we saw in person was a woman slightly older than the one on the website, so I assumed the photo must have been taken some years ago. "Good afternoon, I assume that you're Mary Ellen Connor." She pushed the door open fully now and looked at me first and then at him. "Yes, thank you for having us, Miss Simmons. We're not sure who we can even turn to about this." Connor nodded and then brought his head down slightly as if admitting defeat. "Nobody, I hate to tell you. You're not the first to come to me about something like this, but you're probably the only ones to have." She seemed hesitant to finish her sentence but did so after a brief pause. "Survived." Connor and I turned to meet our eyes and Rebecca invited us in, apologizing for saying what she did and shut the door behind us once we had entered. She went to make us coffee while we took our shoes and jackets off and made ourselves comfortable in her living room, and I tried taking some of the stress off by petting her puppy, a French bulldog that couldn't have been older than a few months. They allow pets in the building. I tried initiating small talk when she came back to set a friendlier tone before we got to what we were really here for. Now you can say that. Honestly, the owner is against animals of any kind in the apartments, but I convinced him how little trouble he would cause and that if he broke or damaged anything, I would pay back in full. Isn't that right, Frankie? In response, Frankie mustered up a half bark and licked her hand as she went to pet his head, and then sat down on the opposite side of the sofa that me and Connor were on a small cushioned chair. "I know who you are, Marielle." I must admit that phrase almost sent me into fight or flight considering that I'd been on edge to say the least for the past little over 2 days, and I was ready to jump up and run out of that apartment. But she continued just in time to allow me to prevent myself from doing so. "Your husband contacted me a year ago trying to find out more about the mirror world and the creatures living in it. I'm sorry to hear what happened and that you had to relive it, writing it in the email." Her mentioning my ex-husband's death was a gut punch, as I still hadn't even started processing it over the weight of everything that's happened, and I stared blankly at her. Connor noticed and took over the conversation for me. "Did he mention anything that we might need to know? Why he was trying to break into Mariella's home?" Rebecca took a sip from her coffee, which still had steam coming off of it, and switched her gaze to me, picking up Frankie off the floor once he had jumped off as soon as I stopped petting him. Obviously completely disinterested in me now, and set him on her lap. "Because he was afraid of exactly what's happening to you. I can't put this any other way, so I'll be forward about it. Russell did not seem exactly in his right mind even back then. He was talking about all kinds of theories and supposed discoveries that he had made that sounded like the ravings of a madman. But what was evident to me was his duty to protect you from it. I assume that's why he was there that night, but he was unlucky enough to encounter something that only appeared to be you. Both Connor and I were at a loss for words at how casually this woman seemed to be talking about this, as if it was an everyday occurrence that some body snatchers who apparently lived in your mirror or something like that took over your life and pretended to be you. But that didn't stop her from continuing. Admittedly though, he was one of the few to have actually come to me with more than just claims of there being another version of them. "So what are these things, and why are they targeting us?" Connor said, not having even touched his coffee yet. Not that I did either. I don't know for sure how they choose their hosts, as I call them, but from what Russell and others before and after him have told me is that they form when you feel lost for an extended period of time in your life, like a piece of you seems to be missing. Is that description accurate for you after your divorce, Marielle? Part of me was getting more and more furious at how confidently this woman was trying to gouge the low points in my life, but I couldn't bring myself to go against her when everything she had been saying so far was correct. And it didn't help that she sounded so confident. Well, maybe it did. Because we were finally talking to someone who not only believed us, but seemed experienced in the topic at hand. It does. And I guess the same goes for Russell. He started talking about all of this a month after his father had passed in a tragic work accident. I thought that he was taking the loss really bad, but my God. I took a moment to think everything through and allowed myself to finally take a sip from the coffee that Rebecca had made before continuing. "You said that he had made some kind of discovery when he had come to you. What were you talking about?" "Well, I don't know if your husband had ever come in contact with any of them, but according to him, the only way to sever these beings' connection to you was to destroy them in their own world. I'll be honest that I was up until very recently skeptical about its existence as a whole, considering no one had ever actually been to it, or at least done that and returned to tell the tale. But here you two are, and you have evidence." She held her hand up to her ribcage while also looking at my ankle, referring to the dark marks that Connor and I had. I'm sure that he felt as unnerved as I did at the mention of them. "And what do these markings mean? Do you know?" Connor joined in. "My theory is that it's this other reality's way to manifest itself into our own. I can't tell you what that means or how dangerous it may be, but I hope that nobody has to find out." She put Frankie back on the ground and he tried to get her attention again by scratching on her left leg for a second, before making a sound like an angry toddler and curling up by her feet. And then Rebecca leaned on her knees and her eyes darted from Connor's to mine and back. "I know that this will sound like a death wish, but you were already there once. You twice even, Connor. And you both managed to escape. In all my time following this phenomenon, I've not heard or met anyone who's done that. I would say that it's your decision if you wanted to do this, but with those marks that you have, I'm not sure if you have any choice in the matter if you want to stay. You must go back and destroy your imposters before they claim you." I don't have to explain how hard my stomach dropped as we were literally instructed to go back into that maze that took the form of my home. But at the same time, there was no other solution that we could think of, and I'm sure that it had been floating around Connor's head as much as it had been in mine recently. But how do we even go about doing it? We don't know what they even are. How are we supposed to fight them? My voice trembled at the mention of a confrontation with them. "We don't call them mirror people just because we came up with it randomly, Marielle. We came out of that world through your mirror. You see how they're trying to become you slowly. So..." Rebecca stood up and walked over to one of the walls of the apartment that had a large rectangular mirror on it. "My guess is that attacking them with glass will be effective in hurting and potentially killing them." "Your guess?" Connor stood up and I felt the disbelief in his words as if they were my own. "You're telling us to enter whatever that place is again, most likely walking straight to our death or God knows, maybe something even worse. And all you have to go off of is your guess." She turned back to face him, seemingly unaffected by his demeanor. and crossed her arms before speaking. Like I said, I've never encountered one of them myself, and I'm only going off of what I've heard by people that I've spoken to both in person and through my forum. If it makes you feel better, I'm more than willing to come with you. I've been investigating this far too long, and I want to be able to help others in your situation, if they ever come to find me. So you're saying this isn't just happening to me, it's a whole phenomenon. When was the first time something like this happened? I can't tell you for sure, Marielle. Rebecca shrugged and now turned her whole body to face us, and Connor shook his head while sitting down but remained silent. But you are not the only one being haunted by yourself. You might realize now, though, why it's not a widespread threat. People who look for help from those not familiar with it end up ostracized or thrown into mental hospitals. We stayed at Rebecca's apartment for another half an hour, going through Connor's and my experience in the mirror world, and then getting ready to leave and drive back to my house. It sounds just as insane as it did then typing this out. Our conversation on the drive back with Connor in the driver's seat this time was mostly filler or silence. As much as I didn't want to admit it because she was still helping us, Rebecca was not a great person to be around, and I can see why she'd been doing something so out of the ordinary considering how apathetic she seemed to people's emotions. And the second thing that I was looking forward to the most after freeing myself of the other me's torment was not having to spend another second with her. After she gave us some more information and theories about what we have to do, we came to the conclusion that we had to get rid of mine and Connor's double in order to sever our link to this other reality or dimension. We decided that we would do our best to destroy those of the two policemen who disappeared in response to the call if we found them. And I'm sorry if this makes me sound like a bad person, but I was not ready to spend more time in that place while trying to save someone that I didn't know, and I just wanted it to be over already. And I think Rebecca was the only one who, despite all her supposed experience, failed to realize that we were literally about to enter another dimension to fight beings that were nothing close to humans, when she urged us to make it our goal to find them as well. Arriving at my driveway was just as chilling as before, the eeriness amplified by the police car still outside. On our way, we had passed by a store to buy a medium-sized mirror that we broke in order to arm ourselves with shards of its glass, an idea suggested by Rebecca that I was not sure how it made me feel when you take into account the superstitions around the bad luck that will follow you when you break a mirror. She seemed to not care and was more than happy to shatter it without a second thought. Of course, getting herself the longest and sharpest piece she could find and leaving us with the shorter ones. We explained to Rebecca that going up into the attic is what sent both Connor and I into the other world, and he was the first to go up the ladder, then Rebecca, and finally myself. All three of us commented on the sudden chill and cold of the attic and then slowly descended back into the hallway to find nothing out of the ordinary until the first time a room repeated. But what was stranger than usual was how the distortions appeared almost instantaneously, with floating or half-missing furniture, misplaced windows, and the like. I can't believe I'm actually seeing this myself. For a change, this time Rebecca sounded like the one completely lost in the situation. I don't know about Connor, but it made me feel more in control, like I knew what to expect. Of course, I didn't. Okay, listen to me. I tried to sound as confident as I could to grab their attention. I have an idea. We can walk all we want and expect to find one of those things, or we can draw them to us. While I was here, when I made a noise, they came almost instantly. So let's devise a plan. I looked around the room that we were currently in. It was the kitchen, a perfect place for an ambush. I would stay behind the counter by the window looking towards the doorway, on either side of which Connor and Rebecca would wait with glass shards in hand to stab them into whichever creature came first. They agreed to the plan and took their positions while I looked into one of the shelves floating in the middle of the air, instead of which were small glass cups, not behind on defying the laws of physics. Looking back at the others and raising the cup in the air, they nodded in approval and I took a deep breath and braced myself, squeezing my shard in the other hand. Before I dropped the glass, I looked at the mark on my hand, which seemed to have grown to almost consuming my entire palm. We had to get this done, or who knows what would follow us. I simulated a pained yell as I threw the glass onto the ground, and seconds later, the all too familiar static and distant voices started storming towards the kitchen from the other room. Turning the corner was a man in a police uniform. I assume one of the two that were unlucky enough to be sent as the responders the night that I got the call. It took all the strength in me not to flinch as its what were up until now stiff movements turned into a feral sprint accompanied by a reverberating inhuman growl. The moment that thing appeared through the doorway, Connor and Rebecca were swift to stab their shards into its body. Connor managed to slice into its abdomen while Rebecca jammed hers straight into its right eye. Moments later, the awful sound it somehow produced was cut like a TV turning off, and it began crackling until eventually shattering into pieces that littered the floor. The three of us looked at each other in disbelief. We had just killed one of those things, and without it even being able to reach us. For the first time, I felt strong, triumphant, like I was going to be the one that they should be afraid of. Well, that was short-lived. The only form of celebration that we were able to have was momentary looks of widened eyes and smiles before the sounds returned. The footsteps, the screaming, the static. So many sets of footsteps, so much static. Rebecca yelped and Connor held his free hand up to his ear and shut his eyes tight while I backed away from the counter. In that moment of fear, I forgot about the broken window. Before I could see what was about to come through the door, I was pulled back by my hair so hard that for a second I thought my scalp was about to rip. I could only keep myself on my feet for less than 2 seconds, calling out for help before my spine slammed against the bottom of the window frame, and I went limp just long enough to be pulled into the bedroom it was looking into and thrown across half its length, rolling across the floor. I could hear the commotion in the kitchen the whole time. Rebecca screamed while Connor was silent, but I could hear objects being thrown into the walls and an occasional grunt that I assumed came from him. I did my best to stand up as quickly as possible, and that's when I realized my glass shard was gone. Likely I had dropped it when I was grabbed. I opened my eyes to instantly be met with the sight of the other Marielle standing a few feet away from me with her mouth opened impossibly, revealing her entire bottom row of teeth but no tongue. And her eyes were 2 different colors, just like Connor had told me. She produced the same horrifying scream, but it wasn't mixed with any static. It sounded exactly like me, but as if I was being brutally torn apart, like I was being tortured in the most awful of ways possible. Looking around the bedroom, I realized there was nothing that I could use as a weapon, and by the time I did, the other Marielle had started her charge at me again, and I screamed, barely managing to slip past her and throw myself onto the bed. I reached for the pillow and through horrified, panicked inhales and exhales, I threw it at her, which as you may imagine was not a very effective weapon, and I crawled back, gasping as I fell over at the other side. Standing up as fast as I could, I was met with the awful sight of her crawling onto the bed like a spider. But that was not what disturbed me the most. Her head, mouth still hanging open so painfully and eyes empty like a dark abyss. Her head was throwing itself into impossible angles just like that thing pretending to be Connor had been doing while I was hiding. I tried to make my way to the other corner of the room, but she pounced on me, pinning me to the ground with inhuman strength, and she gripped my neck and lifted me up, slamming me into the wall. And as I looked into her, parts of her skin started going black. While I was still running, I heard the sound of glass shattering through the window. When the other Marielle had pinned me, I heard Connor shouting, and a chair suddenly hit my double and it released its grip on me. That moment allowed me to look into the kitchen and see Connor being attacked by his double and disappearing out of sight. And Rebecca. Rebecca was held against the wall by another creature in the skin of a police officer, but her hand was raised and she was holding her glass shard still. All she had to do was drive it into its head and she would have freed herself. But the thing was too fast and it stopped her arm mid-air with its own, squeezing so hard it caused her to drop the shard and scream in pain. All of this happening in less than a second, and then it dropped her arm and put its palm against her mouth. What I witnessed after that was the total disappearance of that thing's everything. It was just a totally black silhouette that resembled a human, with impossibly uneven proportions, constantly swapping. But the only thing that stayed consistent was the arm with which it held onto Rebecca's mouth. Its palm then moved from just covering her mouth to grabbing her entire head, and she let out a guttural scream that only got louder and louder as it tightened its grip. I couldn't see anything more as I still had the other me to deal with. While looking into the kitchen, an idea came to me. I could lure this Marielle towards the window and use its pieces of glass to shatter her. And that's what I did. I sprinted as fast as I could to the window and turned back to see that she was already running for me. Her hands were out trying to grab me, and I ducked right before she was able to and moved to the right, causing her to ram in front of the window and into its frames. It was now or never. I turned around and gathered all the strength that I had left to grab the other Marielle's head and slam it into the sharp piece of glass pointing right up. She was able to release one final shriek before it pierced into her left eye, and she stood there frozen and silent. At that moment, I looked up to see what was happening inside the kitchen, and I saw that Rebecca had completely disappeared, while Connor was still in a tussle with his double. I was about to crawl through the window back to help before I was forced down on the floor by an awful throbbing pain in my ankle, hand, and now neck, where the other Marielle had held me up. But the pain was soon to disappear, and I looked back up towards the window where my double was beginning to crack, and I called out for Connor one last time before she turned to pieces, and my memories end there. What I remember immediately after was waking up in a hospital bed with an IV going into my left hand, and I was covered by a sheet. I was so exhausted that I could barely produce any sound that alerted a visitor I didn't know I had sitting on a chair by the bed. "Easy, Marielle." The voice was that of a woman, and it would certainly have made me scream if I had the strength for it. "You've been out the longest out of us three." I slowly turned my head to see Rebecca smiling at me, with this expression that had something off about it, but I choked it up to condition. "Rebecca, what happened?" "We did what we had to do is what happened, but you were completely out of it when we came out." I was too worried about Connor to ask what she had meant by "came out." I was definitely in need of a memory refresher. "Where's Connor? Is he okay?" "Oh yes, honey, don't worry about him. He's in the neighboring room. You two had a real struggle in there." She then stood up, and at that moment, I could not remember how she had suddenly disappeared while we were in that place. She made her way to the door and opened it, stepping out. "You'll have to ask the nurses if you can see him though." "Wait, Rebecca," I called out weakly. Is it over?" "I'll tell you later, Marielle. Visiting time is over and I need to feed Toby, you know. He's probably starving by now. You know how much Frenchies eat." Before I could question her more, she shut the door and I was left alone. For the first time, completely alone and separated from Connor since he had offered me his help. I was afraid for him and I wanted to see him, but at least I had Rebecca's word that he was okay. I moved the covers to look at my hand and ankle. The parts where I had been marked were covered in bandages, and I had no idea what was under there. And when I ran my other hand over the front of my neck, I confirmed that the case was the same with it too. I was sure that if they had remained like that, I had a lot of explaining to do, and I wasn't sure how I was going to go about it, but I had the chance to finally rest and I wasn't about to say no to it. Not long after, a male nurse entered my room with a tray of food and smiled under his mask. "Hello, miss. I was told that you were awake. You were in quite the condition when we got to you. It was a stroke of luck your neighbors saw you before you had lost too much blood." "Blood? What happened to me?" I recalled the black marks again and ran my hand over the bandages on my neck. "You had some really deep wounds where the bandages are, and your neighbor's son saw you passed out on the driveway bleeding. Poor kid, but he saved your life." "Is Connor here? Can I see him? He was with me." The nurse looked at me confused and scratched his head. "Ma'am, there is nobody else with you, and we don't have a patient by that name in the ward." I raised my eyebrows and felt myself begin to tense. "That's impossible. He was with me. Check again, please. I was with two other people, that lady and Connor. Please, check again." Okay, ma'am, okay. Don't stress yourself out, please. You really need to rest and keep yourself steady. I'll be back in a few moments. He smiled and nodded at me before turning around and leaving the room, but I was too nervous for pleasantries right now. I started to wonder why Rebecca was in such a rush and why she would lie about Connor if he wasn't here. I had remembered by now how she suddenly went missing while I was still inside that place, but I thought that just like how I had returned to the real world after I had killed the other me, the same thing must have happened to her. But there wasn't another her, right? That's when I replayed our conversation over a few times in my head before she left, and I kept stopping at one detail in particular. Was I misremembering it? Or did she get the name of her dog wrong? Damon McCory, Rain, Big Country Allen, Meat Gasher, Smiling Cat, Jerry Ramey, Die Screaming, Nelson Asada, Malcolm Black. Around 5 years ago, I took my girlfriend Abby to the zoo. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the zoo. I also don't love it. It always just felt a little weird to me, watching all those animals in cages. It doesn't necessarily bother me enough not to go, however. I just would never go on my own volition. I remember that week that we both got a Thursday off from work. We decided that it would be fun to go do something that would normally be busy on the weekend. As we pulled into the zoo parking lot, it seemed that we had a good plan. It was at least half as busy as usual, even though it was 9 a.m. and they had just opened up. As we got out of the car, my girlfriend and I put on some sunscreen and made sure that our snacks made it into our backpacks. My girlfriend let out an excited squeal as she saw the sign for the zoo entrance. It made me smile. I wasn't there to watch the animals after all. I was there because I knew that it would make her happy. I just wanted to see her reactions to her favorite animals. I wish I knew back then what was in store for her. I wish she didn't have to see the horrors of the zoo that day. If you're reading this, Abby, I'm so sorry. I hope that you can forgive me one day. We walked up to the gate. Abby held my hand and resisted the urge to skip. We made our way to the line to get tickets and chatted about what animals to go see first while we waited. Next, a voice from the farthest booth called out in a cheery tone. As we walked up to the ticket booth, I wasn't fully paying attention. Typically, I like to give people who are working jobs like this my full attention and try to be as nice as possible. Make eye contact, be patient, not be on my phone. You know, the common courtesy that you should pay to an employee like this. I try my best to make up for the annoying Karens who ruin their days by doing these things. However, I was fumbling with my wallet and Abby was behind me asking me something, so I was awkwardly facing her as I walked up. As I was looking at my wallet for a credit card that I had misplaced, I looked up at the employee to apologize for taking so long. After glancing at him for a second, I had to do a double take. Not on purpose or anything, my brain just did it automatically. No problem, sir, take your time. The odd man in the ticket booth said as Abby slipped her card over to him. Wonderful. Let's get you 2 tickets so the fun can begin. As he ran the card, I felt like my eyes were glued on his face. My brain was trying to make sense of what exactly was off about him. Of course, most of all was the tone of his voice. It sounded way too happy, almost robotic, or like it was from some kid's cartoon. His mouth was just slightly too wide. The teeth inside his mouth were too white and perfect. His eyes looked like marbles moving around in his head. I think I only saw him blink once. I know that because the blink was painfully slow. I thought that he was making a joke or something. His neck seemed to be just barely too long, and the last thing that I noticed was his joints didn't seem to be a normal proportion. For example, his forearms were shorter than what felt normal. Oh, silly me, I almost forgot to mention something important. I cringed as the man kept talking. The park is no longer taking credit cards beyond this point, and you are required to click on the link in your email to link your card to our brand new Zoo Wallet feature. It's much more convenient than taking out a card every 5 minutes to buy something. I tried to tell him that we were not interested and that we had cash, but he went on and on about how it was a new policy. I thought that it seemed a little off and like some kind of scam, but Abby looked anxious, so I agreed and did what he wanted. I definitely should have seen it as a red flag when the guy made us both do the whole process, but I didn't want to disappoint Abby. The argument wasn't worth getting kicked out. Alrighty, you crazy kids, you're all set. Don't forget to see the seal show at 12:15 at the main pool, the employee said with a smile that seemed to stretch his mouth even wider apart. Oh, okay, thank you, I said in a rush, realizing that I was probably staring at the man like he was a monster the whole time. We walked into the entrance and were greeted with a gift shop, a map of the park, a snack shack, and some benches. I was going to ignore how creeped out I felt and try to focus on my girlfriend. I followed her to whatever exhibit she wanted to see first. She was quiet, and so I pulled her into the shade and asked her what was wrong. As I asked her, she looked around like she was paranoid. Sorry, Noah, it's probably nothing. It's just that I got creeped out by that guy. And normally when somebody creeps me out, I don't think about it for much longer, but... I thought that she was going to say more, but she stopped there. I sighed. I wasn't sure if it was good or bad that she got the same feeling from the guy. You know what, I got the same feeling from him. But hey, let's not let it ruin our date. We should keep an eye out for him, but other than that, let's relax and have fun. You're right. Okay, first on our list are the penguins, she said as she happily grabbed my hand and pulled me in the direction of the penguin exhibit. We made it to the penguins and she was devastated to not see any. She moved on quickly, trying not to waste any time, and headed towards the elephants. As we walked up to the elephants, we noticed that they were gone too. I didn't think much of it because I felt like it's normal to not have some animals out. She didn't think that it was normal. We saw an ice cream stand, so we went to buy some and thought that we would ask the worker if he knew what animals would be out today. As we got closer, I heard a small gasp from Abby. She grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the ice cream stand. Okay, am I crazy, or did you get a good look at the guy selling the ice cream? Abby said to me in a worried tone. I felt a shiver down my spine. No, why? I said, trying not to sound scared. That guy looks the same as the guy who gave us our tickets. Not exactly, but the mouth, the eyes, the arms. It's all the same. I mean, what the hell? Abby, they're probably related. Just calm down. I promise that it's okay. If he creeps you out, we don't have to get ice cream. Let's just keep walking around. She nodded and gave a half-convinced smile. The first animals that we found were the monkeys and apes. However, some of the exhibits were empty. They had chimps, orangutans, and baboons, but the capuchin and the gorillas didn't seem to be out. We stood in front of the glass, watching the animals with a couple of other people. After watching them for a few minutes, we shared a glance, a confused glance. Noah, are they sick? They aren't acting right. No, babe, they aren't sick. I'm sure that it's nap time or something. I said to try and calm her, but I knew nothing about these animals or how they normally act in a zoo. I didn't know what to say to make her not worry about them. She told me that she was going to find a bathroom, but she'd be right back. I felt concerned as she walked off, but I tried to take the opportunity to look closer at the animals without it freaking Abby out. I got close to the glass of the orangutans. I've always felt a bit of unease about monkeys and apes. They just feel so human that I feel weird looking at them in this setting. But this felt so much worse. One of them looked me in the eye and it felt so human that it made my stomach turn. I saw it weakly grab at its side and wince in pain. I saw a line of stitches on its side. They looked sore. I felt terrible. I hated that I was even supporting this place. Abby came back a few minutes later and we left before she could see the orangutan in pain. Next, we headed for the tigers. We walked up to the outdoor tiger enclosure and saw a few tigers lying out in the sun. This time, it wasn't hard to tell that something was really off. I saw moms pulling their kids away and people looking on in shock, not able to look away. Some people laughed, thinking that it was a joke. We should have just left then. We had so many signs of something being wrong. I don't know why we didn't listen. We walked up to view the tigers and saw something that took our brains far too long to process. What we first saw as tigers, we noticed that the only thing tiger-like about them was the stripes. After looking for a while, we realized what we were really looking at. People. People lying out in the hot sun painted like tigers, except they had ears on top of their heads. Their torsos looked longer than normal and their arms and legs were now shorter. It was clear that they were human but horribly modified to look like something else. People started to scream and ran to the exit. Abby and I did the same. We got out our phones to call 911 but soon found our phones were completely fried, not even turning on. As I looked around at the rest of the crowd, I saw other people in the same situation. That link that they made us click for our credit cards must have been one hell of a virus to kill all our phones like that, Abby said to me with tired lungs. I felt so dumb at that moment. I swear that's the oldest trick in the book. And now we were all unable to call for help. As we made it to the gate, an employee shut all the exits. Abby grabbed my arm with what felt like all of her strength. The employee looked just like the other creepy employees that we had seen. A different hair color and height, but nonetheless, just as creepy and uncanny as the other guys. He turned around to greet us. "Hello everyone, what seems to be the matter? Aren't we all having fun? You have to at least stay for the seal show at 12:15. The crowd of around 50 people started revolting and yelling at the man, demanding that they be let out. The man's smile slowly morphed into a frown as he grabbed a man standing near him. As the man screamed to let him go, one more employee walked up to the flailing man. One employee grabbed his shoulders and the other grabbed his waist. The man started wailing in pain as the two employees started to stretch his torso to be longer. Next, they grabbed his arms and legs and pushed them to make them shorter. The man stopped fighting and he went limp. After they were done, they threw him on the ground. The shape of his body now matched the tiger's that we just saw. The only thing he was missing were the stripes, the tail, and ears. The crowd was silent. Now, unless anyone else wants to go into the tiger exhibit, I highly suggest that everybody makes their way to watch our seal show, the employee said as his terrifying smile grew back on his face. Right this way, folks, he said with a pep in his step as he skipped to the seals. We all followed in horror. I felt so helpless. I was supposed to keep my girlfriend safe. She was quiet, but I could hear her shaking breath and feel her clammy hands holding mine. As we walked to the seals, we passed by a few other enclosures on the way. I wish that I could have somehow blocked Abby from seeing what I saw, but the damage was already done. We passed by the bears and saw more people lying in the hot sun. Awkward patches of fur covered them, their bodies morphed into unnatural states. And then we walked by some deer. Most of the people were lying on the ground, but some were trying to stand on their brand new 4 legs, but failing and screaming in pain. I could see blood on their heads from where the antlers were put in. After what felt like miles, we made it to the seal show. About 10 employees surrounded us, all of them with these same terrible features. The setup for the show wasn't anything too crazy. Just a few bleachers lined up facing an in-ground pool, and a platform where an employee stood with a microphone to talk about the show. I don't think that I've ever heard such a glaring, painful silence in my life. I think we were expecting to be sacrificed or something. The anticipation was awful. One of the employees walked up to the platform by the pool, his footsteps loud and echoing in the process. "How are we all doing? Having a whole lot of fun, I hope." He hated our silence. He then said it again into the mic, this time much louder and in a much deeper and angry tone. I said, "How are we all doing?" We all nervously clapped, trying to avoid getting turned into an animal. "Glad to hear everybody's having such a magical day. Don't forget that we will be closing right after the seal show, so everyone please make sure to head out right after the show. But remember, kiddos, leaving in the middle of a show is rude." The show began. We heard music from the speakers and saw a second employee come out dragging something. I think the employee who had the mic was spouting out some random facts about seals or something. But that's not where my mind was focusing. I was focused on the employee dragging a person to the pool. The person had their arms duct taped to the side. Their legs were taped together and a cheap-looking fin was taped on their feet, while also painted gray. It looked like the employees had not yet morphed them yet. They tried to scream but had duct tape covering their mouths as well. It seemed like once they got morphed, their minds went to mush. This poor person seemed to be still fully conscious while being tied up and dragged to the water while 50 people watched. Just as the employee was saying something about seals being great swimmers, the person was thrown into the water. We all sat and watched as the person with their entire body bound by duct tape sank to the bottom of the pool. People started to panic again and try to fight back or escape. Abby and I sat in fear as we saw the employees catch helpless people and turn them into something unrecognizable. Abby and I sat in disbelief as we watched not only so many people around us become something else, but at least 20 people or seals were thrown into the pool helpless. 30 minutes later, the show was over. Only around 15 people remained on the bleachers as the employees took a bow. "Thank you everyone for coming. Don't forget that we are now closed. Our staff will now escort you out of the park." The employees started walking towards the exit. Abby seemed relieved, trying not to get too excited, but started to cry and just wanted to get out of that place. I knew that I had something that I needed to do that would make Abby angry, something that might cost me my life, but the employees seemed to not be watching us as closely. I knew that I had to act right that second. "I'm sorry, but I have to do this," I said as I gripped her shoulder and whispered softly. Her head swung to look at me. Her eyes were wide as saucers and her muscles were tensed up. As we followed the group of employees walking us to the exit, we went around a bend with some bushes. I snuck into one of them, hoping and praying that the employees wouldn't see me. They made it very clear that the zoo was closed and that they wanted us to leave. I figured I knew what my fate would be if I got caught. I sat in the bush, watching as they escorted Abby and the rest of the others out. I was trying so hard to stay still that I needed to remind myself to breathe. I only had to wait for about 15 seconds before they were all out of eye line. The way the employees skipped as they walked seemed to help them move fast. I soon felt the confidence to get up and go search the zoo for anyone that I could save. I knew that it might be dumb to even try and save anyone, but it seemed like the seals were still pretty aware of everything going on. I thought that I could maybe find more people that were not damaged so terribly that I could save them. I started into a sprint. I didn't think the employees would come around or anything, but I couldn't be sure. And if people were suffering somewhere in the zoo, I wanted to help them as soon as possible. I was running from exhibit to exhibit, first seeing if the animals were gone entirely, or if they had people in them. Then I would try and decide if they were too far gone to even help. I felt an enormous weight on my shoulders. Who am I to decide if someone should be saved or not? I realized after looking at the exhibits how to figure out if I would find people in them. If the animal was dramatically bigger or smaller than a person, the animals would be missing from that exhibit entirely. Only the animals that were similar in size to humans were replaced by a person. What I gathered from that information is that the employees' morphing abilities were limited. When people got morphed into an animal, that they didn't have to be an exact size match, but slightly lengthening or shortening limbs or torsos, and making it hard for them to walk like humans. But that was about all that they could do. They couldn't make ears or a tail grow out of someone. They couldn't get fins or fur, but they sure did their best to simulate it. However, some of the exhibits still had people in them despite not being the exact size of that animal. The bear exhibit, for example. It felt like the employees had an okay understanding of animal sizes, but not great. They knew that a penguin was too small and an elephant was too big, but I'm not completely sure where the line was. I don't think that they knew either. As I would look into the exhibits, I would call out to them. If anyone was still able to talk, I would try to get them out. I know that's not the deciding factor over if somebody is worth saving, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I knew that I couldn't help everyone and I had to make some tough decisions. Most of the times I called out to them, nothing came out of their mouths. Some of them half-heartedly opened their mouths, but nothing came out and they stopped. I ran up to the zebras and yelled in. And to my amazement, somebody called back in a quiet and helpless, "Help." The enclosure was easy for me to get into. It was just a big fence, and so I got in pretty quick. I got to the person who had called out to me and dropped to my knees. I couldn't believe how much worse it was up close. I was trying my best not to look at their deformed body, but it was like trying to look away from a car crash. I could see their once human body now sculpted into something unearthly. I could see where fake zebra ears were harshly sewn into the side of their head. Their hands sewn together in a fist to try and simulate a hoof. Their body was painted in cheap white paint and black stripes were poorly brushed over it. A mane that looked like it was super glued to the back of their head and down the back of their neck made out of a cheap party wig. Even after looking at all the terrible things that had been done to this person, I realized the part that made my stomach turn the most was the human face remained the same. Of course, the sickly body of the person made me feel nauseous, but the completely unchanged human face made me feel like I was going to lose it. For some reason, the employees put more effort into some of the morphing than others. Maybe they ran out of time and had to rush the last few. When we saw the monkeys first, they seemed to almost be sewn into fursuits, realistic enough to not have us running for the doors just yet. Still creepy as hell nonetheless. I realized as I was sitting by this person, there was no way to get them out and help them. I felt so stupid that I should have known I couldn't get anyone out. One of my flaws has always been blind optimism. I thought that I could find a way. I thought that I would have some kind of brilliant plan once I saw someone who needed help, but I had nothing. I knew that I just needed to try and get out safe and get the police. I felt regret. I should have just walked out with Abby and made sure that she was safe. If I had followed the group out, I could have called the police by now. Why did I have a savior complex? As I sat in my self-pity, I saw something underneath the person. I lightly pulled on it and a dirt-covered lanyard came out. It was a photo ID and a name on it. The face matched the person in front of me. Ken? I whispered to the creature that was once human. He looked up at me and smiled. It was a sad and tired smile, but I could tell that he was happy to just hear his name again. It probably helped him feel more human again too. Just as soon as his smile came, it was gone again and replaced by pain. He balled up, a bloody fist reached down to his side as he moaned in pain. I could tell that something was very wrong, but I knew that I couldn't do anything about it. I just sat with him for a few minutes and watched him take his final breath. I tried to not let the guilt overtake me as I sat with his body. After a few minutes, I gave up on trying to save anyone but myself. I just needed to get out. Luckily, I was at the backside of the zoo and I could see a brick wall that I could jump. I made my way out of there pretty easily, just a few cuts and bruises. Once I was out of the zoo, I didn't even bother going to the parking lot to get my car or to find Abby. I knew that I just had to get to a working phone. I made it to a gas station about 15 minutes later and used the phone to call 911. After that, I called my sister to come and get me. I knew that if my phone still wasn't working, and then odds were Abby's phone wouldn't work either. I still tried a couple of times as I waited for my sister to see if I got lucky. Once my sister got me, we went to Abby's house. Her mom opened the door and she looked pissed. She told me that Abby didn't want to talk to me. I was sad that she didn't want to talk, but I was greatly relieved that she had made it out and was home safe. I told her mom that I understood and I went home. I kept checking the news, looking for anything about that zoo, but there was nothing. I waited until the next morning and still no news about it. I decided to drive back to the zoo at around 2 p.m. It was normally open until 6 p.m. However, the day that I was there, the employees so graciously had closed early. I had to go back. It was all that I could think about. I had to know. As I came into the parking lot, I was amazed to find that it was busy. People coming and going, laughing, having a great time. I was so confused. I decided that I needed a closer look, and so I parked out and walked up to the ticket booth. I could feel my hands sweat as I got closer and closer to the entrance, but I had to know what was going on. From the back of the line, I could see the employees and they looked normal. I wanted to get closer and see inside, and so I got in line to buy a ticket. I was warmly welcomed by the employee giving me my ticket. She was moving slowly, but she was friendly, and most importantly, not one of those sick creators from yesterday. She looked confused at her computer screen and she asked a coworker for help. "Oh, I know what happened. You need to do this instead," the employee's coworker said as she randomly pushed buttons to make the computer work. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. We just got your ticket working now. Sorry for the wait. A bunch of previous employees quit yesterday or something, and they didn't want to close the zoo while they trained new people. So almost everybody here today is brand new to the job. We appreciate your patience." I froze where I stood. I didn't know what to say or what to do. Those disgusting creators came in and morphed all the zoo employees into animals and showed them off and terrorized so many zoo customers, just for the owners of the zoo to reopen the next day. Do they even know what happened? Do you by any chance have any more information on what happened with the employees? I said to the woman as I was greeted with a confused eye squint. No, sorry, I don't. I just needed the money, so I took the job." No, that's fine, don't be sorry. I was only wondering if you knew," I said to the woman as she stood in her ticket booth awkwardly. I made my way into the park. I immediately noticed that all the small and large animals were back and looked totally normal and healthy. I checked on all the enclosures that had people in them the day before very closely, and to my surprise, everything was normal. All the animals, big, medium, and small, were back to normal, and it was the same with the employees. Everyone was normal. I continued to do more research into the employees that got turned into animals, and I found nothing. It was all covered up. It looked like the zoo just said that they all quit. Not sure how them just disappearing was explained to their families. I tried to go to the cops and give them my testimony, but unsurprisingly, it wasn't believable. Abby never wanted to tell the cops or anyone for that matter what had happened that day. She told me in a letter a few months later that she could never forgive me for abandoning her at the zoo. She understood why I felt the need to help other people, but was hurt that I didn't feel the same need to protect her and keep her safe. I haven't heard from her since. Still to this day, I have no clue what those morphing creators were. It was like they even tried to morph themselves to look human, and then put on some kind of weird show for us. Maybe trying to impress us, or maybe trying to scare us. I will never know. It seemed like they had no respect for human life, but they still cared about the animals. I say this because they never used any real animal parts for their vile creations. It was always cheap replicas of animal parts. The new employees seemed clueless about anything weird happening. I ended up finding a couple of old employees that were still alive, the ones that had that dreadful day off of work. I was able to talk to one who was a janitor. He showed up at the zoo the next day with all the gates still locked and customers wanting to get in. It took a while before they found somebody with a key to even get it. I asked him about how the animals looked that morning, and he was confused about me being worried about the animals, but he didn't think much of it and told me that they were fine, just a little bit hungry. So those creatures took the animals somewhere else for safekeeping while they played their sick little game on us. I've tried so hard to put the pieces together, but I honestly just want to move on now. I'm posting this here as a sense of closure. I want to move on with my life, and I'm hoping this will do the trick.